Chapter 581. Luo Nan, who was outside the restaurant, was a bit baffled. Out of the blue, a beautiful girl with a pale face bumped into his embrace. Then a fully armed fellow with sunglasses and a mask caught up from behind. He didn't care about the group of people and extended his hand to pull. Then the hedonistic young master He Donglu, who was treating tonight, sent a flying kick. He sent the sunglasses masked man flying into the glass door. The sunglasses were slanted, revealing a large portion of his handsome and twisted face. He had a bit of an impression. With great difficulty, Luo Nan was able to match the handsome faces and identities of the man and woman. Clara? They were all from the same company as his sister. Clara in his embrace was a member of the BHD group. Though it was an 18th tier group, she was extremely good-looking. Another member of the group, Bai, had contacted him twice recently. They had arranged to have a meal together. Their relationship could be considered decent from Luo Nan's perspective. As for the sunglasses masked man, he had an impression of him, Lan Lin, the so-called high-quality idol. But he still hadn't been captured. He was one of the female celebrity Ji Qiong's friends with benefits. It was reasonable to say that he was a high-risk person for the mutant infection. What the hell was the branch doing? Oh my. We're kindred spirits. Perhaps it was Luo Nan's misperception, but He Donglu's tone was a bit odd. However, this also proved that He Donglu finally recognized who this person was. The smile on his face changed a bit. He walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't wait for Lan Lin to crawl up and stomped him to the ground. I never thought that you would have a bit of dog's hit luck, kid. He Donglu had stomped Lan Lin in order to express his attitude in front of Luo Nan. But now it was inevitably mixed with personal resentment. He twisted his neck, feeling unwell from head to toe. He originally wanted to have a one-night stand with that female artist called Ji Qiong, but he never thought that she was actually a carrier of the mutant infection virus. He was tossed and turned by the military medical organization several times in the following week. It was with great difficulty that he was able to pass the test. Now it seemed that the kid, Lan Lin, had escaped a calamity. This made him feel quite unhappy. He Donglu felt that it was natural for his family to stomp on others, but he was a bit too arrogant. Lan Lin was an idol that millions and millions of boys and girls chased after him. How could he endure such extraordinary humiliation? As an idol, Lan Lin's physical qualities were decent. He immediately arched his back and straightened his body, causing He Donglu to stagger. Then he held the glass door and struggled to get up, shouting, "Security, security." Lan Lin's personal assistant, follower, and bodyguard discovered the problem at this time. They made a big fuss as they rushed over. Luo Nan and He Donglu had no lack of bodyguards by their side. As for the restaurant's security guards, it was impossible for them to ignore this situation. They immediately sent more people to control the situation. A group of people crowded the entrance of the restaurant. Luo Nan was very vexed by this sort of scene. If tonight's banquet didn't involve an important matter, he simply wanted to turn around and leave. Luo Nan let out another sigh. He lowered his head to look at the beautiful girl in his embrace, who was in a dazed state. "Hey, Clara. Are you all right?" The second greeting finally brought Clara back to her senses from her absent-minded state. She quickly recognized Luo Nan. She also roughly recognized the current situation. She subconsciously struggled for a bit and came out from Luo Nan's embrace. "Thank you, Mr. Luo." The way Clara addressed him was far more distant than on the day they first met. She wasn't in a good state of mind, but she also had the modesty of a woman. She also wanted to save face. The more it was like this, the harder it was to say some words. She was even more unwilling to stay here for too long. She didn't turn around to look at Lan Lin's condition. She bowed once more towards Luo Nan. "I'm sorry for disturbing you. I'll apologize to you later." Clara didn't even raise her head after speaking. She wanted to leave with quick steps. Just as she passed by Luo Nan grabbed her by the arm and pulled her to a stop. "Wait a moment. Don't go yet. This action was more or less the same as Lan Lin's. Clara's heart tightened, and she looked back in shock. The entrance to the restaurant was crowded with people. Naturally, He Donglu wouldn't put himself in danger. He had long since retreated back. He was originally mulling over how to deal with that pretty boy Lan Lin, but when he saw Luo Nan's actions, he couldn't help but join in the fun. He immediately laughed. Look at the trouble in front of you. You want to leave with just a word of thanks? How could it be that easy? This fellow wouldn't be able to sleep if he didn't take liberties with the beautiful girl. It wasn't even a matter of taking liberties. At least Luo Nan remembered that He Donglu was quite interested in Clara during the last rehearsal. So Luo Nan gave him a cold glance. He Donglu immediately responded with a smiling face, appearing to be quite good-tempered. But at this time, whether it was Clara, who was close by, or Lan Lin, who was separated by the crowd, they both recognized this extremely famous crown prince bro in their circle. With Luo Nan's keen senses, he was already aware of Clara's instantly stiffening body and her highly taut mental state. This made her even more terrified and flustered than when Lan Lin had caught up. It was very clear that the young girl's thoughts were crooked. As for Lan Lin, when he saw He Donglu's face clearly, his chest, which was about to explode from being squeezed by a ruthless aura, was like a punctured balloon. In a short amount of time, he became a piece of soft skin. The ground beneath his feet became even softer. He shrunk down the moment he touched the glass door. In his mind, he just wanted to be a dog. He borrowed the crowd of people in front of him to tuck his tail between his legs and hide in a crack in the ground. Oh, Lan Lin subconsciously shot a glance at the restaurant when he thought of a dog, but he didn't see the woman who had driven him here. This sucked away the last bit of strength he had. It was as if his brain had been scrubbed clean. Large expanses of blankness. Oh my. Did I say something wrong? He Donglu really liked this sort of boss, who became the focus and source of everyone's fear. No, he didn't need to act. If he didn't rein in the rope, then this bro would be a devil incarnate. It wouldn't be a pity if he was stabbed to death by a hero. Luo Nan didn't want to stab him to death for now, but he really wanted to give him a kick. This was clearly a very serious matter, yet this silk pants had bumped into a fork in the road. Actually, Luo Nan's thoughts were very simple. He had seriously sized up Lan Lin before, confirming that this person hadn't been infected by the mutant virus. But the homework he had done some time ago showed that there was a difference between an infected person and a carrier. Lan Lin, who was a public figure, was a natural spreader who couldn't control his pants. He was truly a very troublesome source of danger. Though Luo Nan didn't care about the mutant virus infection anymore, Clara was still a friend he had interacted with before. Expanding layer by layer, there was also the BHD group, Hai Jing, and even the circle of relatives and friends like Imoya. Looking at the relationship between Clara and Lan Lin, they should be quite close. If by any chance she was infected, then the problem would be very serious. For the sake of caution, Luo Nan had to do an examination. He couldn't let her leave no matter what. Right when he was having a headache about how to convince the fearful Clara to accept the examination, someone walked over with a smile. She held Clara's other arm. Barbie, don't listen to their inappropriate words. Clara, who was in a state of panic, turned her head when she heard someone call her by her nickname. She saw a woman wearing sunglasses, dressed in a low-key and elegant manner. This face was even more familiar, even though it lacked the powerful aura that she usually had. Sister Wei Wei. The person who had come was actually the first-rate female artist of the company. She was a strong competitor for the future #1 sister, Shi Wei. Only now did Clara recall that Shi Wei was He Donglu's lover. It wasn't unexpected for them to appear here together. Clara looked at the beautiful and familiar face before her eyes. Even though they weren't normally close, Clara still felt a bit emotional. The rims of her eyes immediately turned red. The current Shi Wei wasn't as aloof and cold as she normally was. Instead, she displayed the bearing of the #1 sister of the company. Barbie, you should be happy that you kicked a trash man ahead of time. Okay, if you keep shedding tears, I can't help but question your level of image management. I'm sorry. The stricter seniority relationships in the company as well as the clearer hierarchy made Clara's heartstrings subconsciously taut. Actually, her heart was still filled with bewilderment and fear right now. Shi Wei's appearance didn't lower the intensity of her fear. Instead, it increased it. After all, this wasn't a group occasion in the company. She even hid it from her manager, Hai Jing, in order to go on a date with Lan Lin. It would be great if things really developed like a romantic story. But she was truly alone and helpless in this current situation. It was also at this time that all sorts of facts and rumors within the industry were like demonic winds blowing from all sides. They seeped into every gap in her thoughts. At this very moment, let alone Shi Wei, even if the company's supervisors and directors were here, it would be hard for Clara to think in an optimistic direction. Shi Wei's unprecedentedly gentle tone still lingered by her ears, but it seeped into the bottom of her heart with a dense chill. This is the suburbs. You're in a daze right now. No one will feel at ease if you go home by yourself. How about? Shi Wei originally wanted to drag Clara along to the banquet. Seeing Luo Nan's reaction, Shi Wei had a good impression of this little girl. But when she spoke to this point, she felt that she couldn't overstep her boundaries. She couldn't help but be stuck for a moment. Then someone followed up her words, how about we first get a room to rest for a bit and tidy things up? We can wait for Mr. Luo to finish his discussion and come out. Then we can go back together. Someone pushed open the restaurant's outer door as they spoke. Warm steam came out along with a fragrant wind, blowing away the crowd of people outside. Luo Nan saw that the speaker was a middle-aged woman with a unique temperament. She had short hair similar to a boy's, and she wore a low-cut suit geared towards women. She was a bit unfamiliar. But the person walking shoulder to shoulder with her couldn't be any more familiar. Brother Bamboo Pole. Bamboo Pole beamed as he waved his hand in greeting, you're free today. Come eat a feast. Young master he is treating. Brother, I'm also here to see a friend. Bamboo Pole didn't chat with him in depth. He nodded and gave the initiative of the conversation back to Sun Jiai. Sun Jiai didn't pay attention to the other people present. She walked straight to Luo Nan, bowed slightly, and offered her name card with both hands. Sun Jiai, one of the local supervisors. I failed to control the situation just now and disturbed Teacher Luo. I ask for your forgiveness. Since she called him Teacher Luo, then she was certainly from the inner world. She was also Bamboo Pole's friend. Luo Nan wouldn't treat her badly. He accepted the name card with both hands. He felt that Sun Jiai's suggestion had touched the bottom of his heart. He took advantage of the situation and said, Sister Sun's suggestion is the best. Clara, why don't you rest here for a bit? We can go together later. Luo Nan needed to give Clara a checkup. He also needed to contact He Yueyin or Her Majesty Empress Wu to clearly ask about the follow-up handling of the mutant invasion. He had already instructed Qi Nikuan, who followed by his side, to make arrangements through the Hexier. However, he was a bit regretful at this time. He didn't bring Cat Eyes along. Otherwise, he would have saved quite a bit of time and effort. Realistically speaking, Clara's will didn't carry much weight now that Luo Nan had made the decision. Luo Nan was worried that she was overthinking things. He simply flipped through his communications book. How about I get someone to come over and accompany you? Bai Yu and the others are nearby. Cat Eyes. No need. I'm fine by myself. Clara's voice was a bit hurried, reflecting an intense feeling of rejection. But soon she pursed her lips and lowered her eyelids. Her slightly curled hair hung down from her forehead. She really was like an exquisite Barbie doll, allowing herself to be manipulated by others. It seemed that there really was a bit of a misunderstanding. Luo Nan was able to feel that Clara's mental cage was withering and warping. There was still a bit of space that was unwavering. This kind of willpower had already exceeded the norm. Shi Wei continued to display the demeanor of a big sister. She stuck closer to Clara's body and laughed lightly. I can accompany Barbie for a chat. I'm not joking. I've always felt that this is a good thing. Clara didn't open her mouth, so she didn't have any objections. Luo Nan grunted, and He Donglu didn't refuse. He just said, "You're done settling things. Hurry up and come over." And so, the matter on this side was settled. He Donglu and Luo Nan walked inside, and the crowd of people in front of the restaurant naturally dispersed. As for a certain person who was curled up into a ball by the glass door, who cared? Luo Nan turned his head back. His target was bamboo pole. "Bro, do you want to come together?" "No need. Let's not disturb each other." Bamboo pole giggled and waved his hand. Sun Jie shot him a covert glare, but bamboo pole didn't pay any attention to her. Luo Nan saw all of these small details and chuckled twice. He felt that this was a bit interesting. He really envied bamboo pole's carefree and easygoing attitude. Not to mention that bamboo pole also hid extraordinary wisdom within. Whether it was the depth and breadth of knowledge when bamboo pole taught him, or the penetrating and incisive theses of the order, or the fact that bamboo pole was the first to break through the barrier of nearly 1,500 participants and enter B rank. All of this proved that bamboo pole was extraordinary. The group of people continued to walk inside. He Donglu was a young master who loved to step on salted fish the most. He felt refreshed and his mind was lively, so he came over and said, "Since we're friends, let's drink a few cups together. Actually, it's good to have Clara accompany you. We brothers drink for the sake of being relaxed and at ease." Luo Nan cast a sidelong glance at him. He never felt that he had any sort of brotherly friendship with this fellow. They walked a few more steps as they spoke, and 4 diners suddenly stood up at a table at the edge of the aisle. They greeted from afar, "Teacher Luo." He Donglu's words were interrupted. He was stupefied for a moment. Luo Nan blinked his eyes and responded, hello." Luo Nan thought that perhaps they were people who had participated in the training course on the 14th. As for the specifics, how could he remember so many people when there were 1,500 of them? Luo Nan didn't pay attention to this sort of thing. He passed by the table of people. But a mere half a second later, a figure stood up diagonally in front of him. It was originally a single person, but the momentum caused the people at the table to be unable to resist. They subconsciously stood up as well. Teacher Luo. It was still an unfamiliar face. He was 40 or 50 years old, but he was the same as the people at the table in front of him. All of them had respectful expressions on their faces. The confused expressions of the other people at the table were all the more distinct. Luo Nan could only respond, "No need to be polite. You guys eat." Chapter 582. This was a high-class restaurant located on the outskirts of Xia City. It was located in a holiday villa under the banner of the Starry Sky Club. The daily flow of people wasn't large, but it was an important place for the ability users of the inner world and the resource users of the secular society to interact with each other. As time went by, it became one of the high-class circles of Xia City. It must be said that this was a relatively specialized place. However, once the pretentiousness was established, some idiots who didn't understand anything flocked to this place like a flock of ducks. They sharpened their brains to get in. Under the tacit approval of the club's organizers, a considerable number of so-called outsiders came here to spend their money. This could more or less be considered a kind of cover. But at this time, when a quarter of the people in the restaurant stood up and addressed him as Teacher Luo, to express their attitude, any cover would be useless. There were over 100 faces in the restaurant. At least for the first few seconds, most of them were perplexed and curious. But as the 20 or so ability users addressed him in the same manner, these self-righteous but ignorant fellows quickly became homogeneous. They even displayed a more sincere and respectful attitude than those in the know. It could be imagined that in the future, the address of Teacher Luo would become a legendary topic of conversation in the so-called circle along with his extraordinarily tender face. All those in the know and those who didn't know would take delight in talking about it. Such a change made Sun Jie, who had been observing from the entrance of the restaurant all along, subconsciously sigh. The less than 2 hours of teaching on the night of the 14th had introduced an extraordinary character to the world. Sun Jie really wanted to immediately hook up with Luo Nan, but she had to deal with the rotten tail pulled out by that dead dog, Lan Lin. She could only watch as Luo Nan and his party climbed up to the second floor of the restaurant and entered the private room area. She used the fastest speed to finish dealing with the chores. There were no other irrelevant people in the surroundings. Sun Jie finally had the leisure to give Bamboo Pole a sneer. You really aren't going to help me at all. But I didn't tear down your stage. Don't tell me you want me to explain everything from start to finish? Sun Jie really wanted to stomp her 10 centimeters into Bamboo Pole's thick skin. But when she thought about how this fellow still had value, all she could do was roll her eyes. Bamboo Pole smiled and said, your dog won't be of much use tonight. Don't tell me you still have feelings for me. Let's be decent to the end. We'll finish the rest of the bottle and go home. Sun Jie continued to sneer, you don't have to blindly think for me. A living dog has its advantages, and a dead dog has its uses. Bamboo Pole observed a moment of silence for Lan Lin. Then, like a gentleman, he opened the door for Sun Jie and the two returned to their seats. Before he could settle down, there was a sudden commotion on the second floor, and it was quite loud. At first there was the loud sound of a door being slammed, followed by a shrill voice shouting, one last thing for him, it's better to leave as a martialist than to die at home as a sickly rich man. 5 seconds later, a tall and lean man with a cold expression appeared at the top of the stairs. At this moment, over 100 gazes from the restaurant downstairs were focused on him. This person could be considered a capable person. Even in such a state, he could still stride forward without looking sideways. Soon, he was out of the restaurant and disappeared into the night. There were over 100 people on the first floor. Some recognized this person, and some didn't. Bamboo Pole and Sun Jie belonged to the former category, Duan Hong, the head of the Thunder Falcon Dojo. He was one of the most famous people in Xia City in recent days. Today is the 19th, right? There are only 3 days left until the winter solstice. Sun Jie raised her wine glass. Half of her face was covered by the luster of the blood-red liquid. Only the corner of her lips curled up slightly. It's quite hard to hold that face in. I can hear the sound of his heart venting even from here. It's as if a burden has been lifted from his shoulders. Bamboo Pole used an idiom to accurately describe the situation. A week ago, not many people paid attention to the grudge between the Thunder Falcon Dojo and the Divine Yu Dojo. But a few short days later, the winter solstice duel between the two dojo masters had become a hot topic in the circle of ability users in Xia City. Especially after that class on the night of the 14th, Teacher Luo had become the absolute focus of attention. Every word he uttered was broken down and analyzed. This included some gossip that had nothing to do with the main topic of the class. Back then, Luo Nan had mentioned the words Gym Master Xiao who taught me body techniques. He had also mentioned the Tinder as well as the classification of the basic unit, the central unit, and the expansion unit. These were relatively core concepts of the system. It was also from that night onwards that the name, Xiao Xinyu, rose quite a bit in the eyes of many people. Correspondingly, the Thunder Falcon Dojo, which had a direct conflict with Xiao Xinyu, became the focus of many people. Fine, they were actually the target of ridicule. As long as Duan Hong wasn't an idiot, he would certainly feel the pressure. As for what he would do next, it could be seen now. At this time, a young man chased down from the second floor. He hurried past. Though he was dressed in casual clothes, the two recognized him. He was Zhu Ling, a lieutenant colonel of the Coastal Defense Army. He was Blood Prison Tian Bang's adjutant. He was the standard rising star of the military. It's better to find someone from the military to solve the problem. Bamboo Pole took a sip of wine. He knew that Duan Hong had a military background, but Duan Hong was quite thoughtful to be able to find He Donglu after so many twists and turns. Though Bamboo Pole didn't see the scene, he could guess it. He Donglu mediated in the middle, and Duan Hong got off the slope like a donkey. Duan Hong could give up a favor along the way. Luo Nan would certainly fall for this. After all, Xiao Xinyu really couldn't afford to be tossed around. As for what Duan Hong's final style was, his persona, and what other tricks he would use in the future, it no longer mattered to the overall situation. He Dong Lu is treating us to a meal. First, he's giving us a favor. He should have some ulterior motive. Sun Jie pondered over the knots within and naturally came to a preliminary conclusion. Does the He family want to take a step further with Mr. Luo? There's no need for He Dong Lu. Secretary he is enough. Sun Jie's eyes squinted in laughter. That's not necessarily true. Oh, there's an inside story? An exchange? As long as you're willing to help. Go ball. Bamboo Pole didn't say anything. He recognized Sun Jie as a friend, but he never forgot the difference in positions between the two. The Starry Sky Society invited Luo Nan to open a class. It was fine if they just wanted to ride on the limelight. At most, it would be a matter of who earned more and who earned less. Presumably, Luo Nan wouldn't care. But the problem was it really good to have Luo Nan too involved with the Starry Sky Society? For ability users, not accepting missions from the Starry Sky Society was certainly the performance of a rookie. But at the same time, lingering in the society's circle without going was undoubtedly the starting point of depravity. The Starry Sky Society was a circle of the inner world's periphery created by the cooperation of headquarters and several capital powers. The purpose of its establishment was to realize the effective exchange of the value of ability users with the capital of secular society. Since the issue of exchange of interests was involved, it was obviously a super fat piece of meat. Everyone wanted to take a bite out of it. As a result, within this society and its attached organization, there were all kinds of entanglements of interests and dark sides that people couldn't bear to look straight at. And the corresponding hundreds of stimulating temptations were the culmination of human society. Bamboo Pole believed himself to be a layman. He was far from being a moral gentleman, but he was an adult with many years of experience. He had his own sense of judgment. But what about Luo Nan? His terrifying worldview was basically set in stone. His outlook on life and values were still in the developing stage. Even if jade was not cut and polished, it would be useless. That was only true for a rock. If there was a giant fusion reactor in front of him, it would be better not to take the risk. Bamboo Pole swirled his wine glass. He looked relaxed, but he had erected a high defensive line in his heart. Sun Jie was also swirling her wine glass. Her eyebrows and eyes, beneath her exquisite makeup, seemed to cast shadows on Bamboo Pole's face through the swirling wine. It also seemed to drift to a place that was hard to reach. It couldn't be said that the two didn't have any appetite for the rest of the time, but most of their minds weren't on chatting. Another 10 minutes or so passed. Shi Wei, who had gone to help Clara settle down earlier, walked into the restaurant and headed to the second floor. Sun Jie looked at her watch. She used Shi Wei's ascension to the second floor as the starting point. She brought out the last of her patients and waited for another 7 or 8 minutes. Finally, she stood up. I'm going to say hello to Mr. Luo and the others. Do you want to come with me? We agreed not to disturb each other. Sun Jie's exquisitely sculpted eyebrows rose. They were like sharp blades that could chop down at any time. Bamboo Pole shrugged his shoulders, and the words that followed were cut short. Sun Jie ascended to the private room area of the restaurant's second floor 90 seconds later. She had an extremely precise grasp of time. The hot appetizers were just served when she arrived at the entrance of the private room. She entered with the food server. There were very few people in the room. Aside from Duan Hong and Zhu Ling, who had just left, there were only Luo Nan, He Dong Lu, and Shi Wei. However, no matter how much Sun Jie thought about it, she still didn't expect to see such a scene when she pushed the door open and entered. Shi Wei was at the center of the scene in the private room. This beauty had already unbuttoned the cuffs of her shirt. She folded the sleeves up, revealing her white lotus-like arm. As a superstar, Shi Wei's body was first-rate in terms of talent and maintenance. Under the soft lighting, her arm was like a divine item carved out of white jade. Even though Sun Jie was also a woman, her heart still rippled when she saw it. All right, Sun Jie was a famous omnivore in the circle. Her gender was not restricted. Her heart was simply moved when she saw this scene. She even thought that she might add one more person to her prey list later. As for the hedonistic son of rich parents like He Donglu, she really didn't put him in her eyes. The problem was the position of Shi Wei's white jade arm. Wasn't it a bit inappropriate? That white jade arm was stretched out on the table. It was crooked yet not crooked. It was straight yet not straight. It was natural and alluring. The problem was that most of her wrist was grasped in the palm of Luo Nan's right hand. Luo Nan's other hand was like a ruler. He measured from wrist to elbow, and then to upper arm. Please, you're not a fashion designer. What's the point of poking and prodding with your finger? Sun Jiayi's eyes were extremely sharp. She could see from the degree of creases on Shi Wei's clothes that this female star had already pulled out the hem of her shirt. If she were to straighten up right now, she might even be able to see a chunk of her belly. Describing such a scene as disheveled was not a problem at all. It didn't matter if this scene was seen by the food server, but it really wasn't appropriate for a famous supervisor to get involved. Chapter 583. He was really rash. This was the first thought that came to Sun Jiayi's mind. If it were someone else, she wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. With the standard of her spiritual senses, even if she didn't enter the room, she could still roughly grasp the situation in the room. But the problem was that the person she was facing now was an extraordinary genius who had just come up with the cage theory and guided 1,500 ability users and extraordinaries to battle for 300 rounds in the Abyss region. It was this genius who stated that the majority of mental senses were a conflict between violating and being violated. The winner would take it all, and the loser would die. No matter how much self-confidence Sun Jiayi had, she could only be a violated character in a wrestling match on the mental plane. That was if Luo Nan was interested in her. Sun Jiayi had never thought of investigating the situation inside the private room. Otherwise, she would only be asking to be humiliated. But Luo Nan, who always had a good reputation, actually did this sort of action. It was really unexpected. Fortunately, Sun Jiayi had been on the battlefield for a long time and had the ability to deal with it. Her expression didn't change at all. It was as if she was watching a very normal scene. She continued to speak according to the predetermined sentence. Mr. Luo, young master He, are the dishes today to your liking? He Donglu more or less knew a bit about Sun Jiayi's background. He chuckled and said, not bad, not bad. Especially the appetizer at the front. It's quite creative. Sun Jiayi's spiritual senses were useless, but the method of observing people that she had trained for many years was still effective. She could roughly judge the current mental state of the three people in the private room. The one who didn't care the most was He Donglu. The one who didn't need to pay attention to the most was Shi Wei. As for the most important one, well, he felt that it was a bit more complicated. Awkwardness was not awkwardness, and calmness was not calmness either. It was more obvious that he was at a loss, as if he did not know how to face it. In the end, he returned to a kind of almost wooden indifference. Such a strange reaction made Sun Jiayi mark it in her heart. She wanted to test it again, but the conditions didn't allow it. Luo Nan wasn't someone who was good at conversing. Communicating with He Donglu was meaningless. Sun Jiayi could only exchange a few more polite words before withdrawing. From start to finish, she was gone for around a minute. When he returned to Bamboo Pole's side, Bamboo Pole asked with interest, how's the progress? Sun Jiayi replied casually, take your time. Bamboo Pole laughed. Fine. You've entered the door. Go ahead and have your wicked thoughts. I won't accompany you anymore. I'll go back and work hard. Sun Jiayi responded, but when Bamboo Pole got up, she suddenly asked, does this Mr. Luo of yours have any special preferences? Do you think I'll tell you? Sun Jiayi pursed her lips and thought for a moment. She nodded but soon shook her head. You're not telling me. Is it to keep it a secret, or is it a secret to begin with? Bamboo Pole was slightly startled, but then he smiled and pointed at her. You're smart, but don't overdo it. This is advice from a friend. Sun Jai bowed slightly in her chair. Thank you, goodbye. Bamboo Pole glanced at her again. His finger slid across his brows, and he performed a nondescript salute before leaving with a smile. As she watched her old friend disappear into the darkness outside the restaurant, Sun Jai lowered her head and thought seriously for a few minutes. Then, in her personal storage space, she opened the information that she had already collected and organized. This included all the information regarding Luo Nan that could be gathered from various channels. It was voluminous and hard to count. It was impossible to comb through all this information in a short amount of time, but Sun Jai already had a clear goal. She used her AI to filter and extract all the information she could find on Luo Nan's social interactions in various situations. This included images and written records. She created a new folder, thought for a moment, and named it Persona. Then, she connected to a secret channel through the internet. Maybe we need to increase the input of the psychological analysis team. Yes, we need it now. Luo Nan wasn't too affected by Sun Jia's entrance in the private room on the second floor, but he never planned on spending too much time on Shi Wei. Not long after Sun Jia left the room, he stopped measuring with his fingers and spoke to He Donglu. Of course it's possible to make a tattoo with extraordinary effects. But from the looks of it, the organizers aren't going to be as straightforward as cutting needles on the female's body. He Donglu raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Of course, it was his request to have Shi Wei undress. In reality, the grand banquet that was coming soon had prerequisites arranged. The participating guests would have to compete in the progress of the missions. Once they won, they would possess high authority in the grand banquet. They could even become the legendary emperor of the party. This would have an enormous effect on raising his prestige in the circle. The theme of this year's grand banquet was Night of Mystery. It was clear that the mystic arts would dominate. It was said that it involved a bit of black magic and the like. The prerequisites for the male guests were uniformly interesting tattoos. They had to be completed on the bodies of their female companions and prey. Victory was determined by quantity. Frankly speaking, He Donglu didn't expect Luo Nan, who was an abstinence type, to be able to solve his problem. He just used it as a gesture of intimacy, but he never expected Luo Nan to take it seriously. Perhaps Luo Nan felt that He Donglu had given up a favor to resolve the problem of the winter solstice challenge in order to send King of Symmetry. Alright, being able to be an emperor for once was certainly an enormous temptation. But I really did come here today to do proper business. He Donglu's heart was indescribably depressed, but he still put on a look of pleasant surprise. You figured it out? Probably. What move is it? Luo Nan thought for a moment, but he shook his head. I don't want to say. He Donglu nearly choked to death on the spot. He swallowed the dry air in his throat with great difficulty. He forced a smile and said, isn't it a bit too early to ponder over the competition for the mission? I'm not interested in the so-called mission. Luo Nan just felt that the organizers of the grand banquet had no lower limits in their thinking. He didn't want to dirty his mouth with those words, so he gave a simple explanation and didn't say anything else. I'll strangle you to death. Okay, I don't even believe it myself. He Donglu choked twice in a row. He wanted to get a bit angry, but when he looked at Luo Nan's wooden and childish face, it was hard for him to make excessive guesses. He could only console himself. Forget it. In any case, this is just the warm-up phase. There will certainly be further explanations in the future. With my resources, even if I can't compare to you professionals, it'll be fine if I put in a bit more effort. He Donglu glanced at the hot plate that had yet to be cut. He forcefully suppressed the emotions in his heart. Just like the main dish that had yet to be served, the theme of tonight's banquet had yet to be truly spoken. If he were to lose his young master's temper at this time, he would be whipped to death by his old man later. Originally, he wanted to wait until they tasted the main dish before entering the topic, but now he had to do it ahead of time. He Donglu grinned and warmed up his facial muscles. Then he immediately took out an exaggerated tone. Professionals. You can't help but admire them. Especially people like you. Just now on the first floor, I've gained new knowledge. It's truly incredible. What's incredible? Shi Wei tidied up her clothes. Her face was smiling like a flower. She was familiar with the venue. She was a very good partner, so she took out her curiosity and inquired at the right time. He Donglu asked curiously, "You didn't see?" "Oh, you went to take care of that little Barbie. That's truly a pity. You don't know this, but when Brother Luo entered the hall on the first floor, at least a third of the people stood up in a hubbub. They all called him Teacher Luo. How could it be like this?" Shi Wei's professional acting skills allowed her astonished and amazed posture to be on point. In comparison, He Dongluo's flattering technique was quite lacking. Plus, he was a layman to begin with. No matter how vivid his words were, it would only make Luo Nan feel awkward. There was no better effect. Luo Nan looked at his watch. Right when he was thinking about whether or not he should give a few words of warning, He Donglu finally ended his introduction under Shi Wei's hint. He rubbed his hands and entered the main topic. "Hey, I'm a layman. There are some things that I can't explain clearly, so I won't say too much and make a fool of myself. I just need to show my admiration. Then let's have a straightforward." The hedonistic young master played with the tone of the Jianghu quite well. Luo Nan felt that these words were more pleasing to the ear than the previous words. He nodded and said, "Just say it. It's like this. I've heard news these past few days. It's about the demonstration equipment related to classroom number 14, demonstration equipment." Luo Nan was stunned. He really didn't understand. It was the day before yesterday or the day before yesterday. You made a few bracelets and distributed them. You said you were experimenting with the dynamo core. A certain person's mouth was full of layman's words, but Luo Nan understood the meaning. For the sake of He Yuan's face, Luo Nan simply corrected him. "That's not a demonstration equipment. It's not a dynamo core either. It's just a test product that simulates the effects of the dynamo core. It's similar to an integrated chip. It's a tool that coordinates the operation of the blood intent ring." He Donglu actually didn't understand, but he seized the opportunity to slap his thigh. "Oh right. It's this. It coordinates the blood intent ring. Speaking of which, brother, do you have any plans to mass-produce this toy?" Luo Nan went, "Oh." He repeated the positioning from before. "This is just a test product. If there's a market, then it's called a product." He Donglu wasn't good at this, but he was used to being a hedonistic young master. He really had a heroic spirit of his own. "Let's be frank. My family wishes to cooperate. Brother, you just need to nod your head, and we'll immediately sign the contract. If there's anything you're dissatisfied with, I'll pull my old man over to talk." Luo Nan responded unhurriedly. "I'm still researching the details. I've been making progress all this time. I've already explained the specifics to Sister Yuan." Cough. "Don't you find my sister's personality troublesome?" "Huh." Luo Nan shot a glance over, and He Donglu immediately put on a wide smile. "I'm saying that her status in the military and the society are already quite subtle. Adding us to the mix, it won't be easy to coordinate. Plus, with her personality, she always has to be within the framework. Isn't it good to be within the framework?" He Donglu nearly couldn't continue. Luckily, he remembered that this aspect was discussed in the rehearsal. He said, "Efficiency. It depends on efficiency. Especially when it comes to your research. It's like the difference between a public laboratory and a private laboratory. If you share a piece of equipment with someone, you have to arrange the time and take turns. Isn't that inconvenient? Plus, the branch's resources are within the framework of headquarters. The two sides don't have a good relationship right now. It's hard to avoid restraining each other. It's hard to guarantee the privacy of some projects. But if you have a private laboratory." Chapter 584. The jeep crushed through the night, speeding along the high-speed magnetic rails on the outskirts of Xia City. Clara was silent the entire way. She was also in a daze the entire way. She only came back to her senses a bit when she saw that they were about to meet the splendid lights of the city. This was due to Bayu's message reminding her. "Where are we? Don't turn around. It's freezing me to death." Bayu's message was followed by an emoticon of teeth chattering and shivering inside an ice cube. Clara couldn't help pursing her lips into a smile. She looked at the night outside and used the virtual keyboard to reply, "We've already entered the rooftop area." The virtual keyboard's luminous effect flickered in the back seat. The little girl always loved to design a few gorgeous colors. She usually felt that they were quite gorgeous, but when she saw the slender figure and the calm and serious face of her peer under the gaudy colorful lights, Clara suddenly felt that the spacious back seat of the car had become cramped. The complicated emotions she had suppressed with great difficulty in the previous half hour were like the flickering lights in the car. They were completely exposed before the eyes of others. At least that was what Clara believed herself to be. She subconsciously held her breath and turned off the keyboard. She wanted to return to her previous state of silence. The person next to her seemed to turn his head to glance at her. It also seemed that he didn't, but Clara felt her entire body become sensitive. Her slightly curled long hair touched the exposed nape of her neck. It was clearly a bit damp. The 20-minute car ride had yet to dry the humidity of the villa's hot spring. It was just like the weeds in her mind. Back then, Wei had intentionally or unintentionally hinted that her own fantasies, including her preparations to abandon herself to despair, appeared absurd and lowly in front of the magnanimous actions of her peer, whom she had only interacted with for half a day. Clara still didn't know, or perhaps she didn't want to know, whether or not Luo Nan understood her preparations. She could only hang her head like a quail. She allowed her fantasies and illusions to weave into a net in the darkness, tightly binding her head and chest. She found it hard to breathe. The incorporeal needle of time suddenly sped up and then slowed down, teasing and tormenting her to its heart's content. This feeling, which could only be experienced by herself, seemed to be even more unbearable than the conflict outside the restaurant an hour ago. Until the jeep reached its destination. "That's by you." Luo Nan finally opened his mouth. The jeep cut into the city road as he spoke, slowly stopping by the side of the road. Bai Yu, who had wrapped herself up like a hairy ball, was hopping around under the streetlights. She saw a small tank-like SUV come over, and she subconsciously jumped back a step. Only then did she see the car door open. Luo Nan, dressed in thin casual clothes, got off the car. Clara came down from the other side and circled around the back of the car. Bai Yu immediately pounced over and hugged Clara as she called her idiot over 10 times. Clara originally thought she had overcome the most difficult hurdle, but as soon as she heard Bai Yu's words, the emotions hidden in the corner of her heart broke through the dam. She hugged Bai Yu and started crying again. Luo Nan was truly helpless when faced with this sort of situation. He immediately had thoughts of fleeing far away. He watched as Clara wholeheartedly hugged Bai Yu and cried. Bai Yu came back to her senses a little, so he focused his voice and whispered in her ear, "Your house is nearby, right? Clara, take care of him. Call me if anything happens." Bai Yu was dressed like a hairy ball, and she still had to hold Clara, who was crying so hard that her body went soft. She swayed back and forth, struggling quite a bit. She couldn't help but open her eyes wide when she saw Luo Nan actually shake his hand and leave. But she was unable to criticize him, so she could only pout, "My house is right behind me. Don't you want to go sit? I have an appointment with someone. I'll be leaving first." Luo Nan didn't have the leisure to watch the two girls hug each other and cry bitterly. Plus, he wasn't lying. His daily schedule was packed to the brim. He really did have to meet with an important person in a bit. He turned around to leave, but he saw Bai Yu being hugged by Clara. Bai Yu looked like she couldn't even move a single step. He thought for a bit and finally decided to do something good to the end, "Get in the car. I'll take you guys to your house. Clara, you're going to sleep at your kid's house today, right?" Bai Yu let out a puff of white steam. "Oh my, I nearly thought I was going to dribble the ball and run." The young girl had no filter on her mouth, and her analogy was gravely wrong. This actually caused Clara to be unable to continue crying for a time. Luo Nan was helpless. He could only invite the two girls into the car and let Baiyu lead the way. They drove to the residential area in the back. Clara was much more relaxed now that she had a friend by her side. Right now, she was curled up in Baiyu's embrace. She was no longer crying, but she was a bit drowsy and sleepy. This was most likely the after-effects of her rapidly relaxing mental tension. Clara was between Luo Nan and Baiyu, so it wasn't convenient for them to talk. But after thinking for a bit, he took advantage of Clara curling up to indicate Baiyu to come closer. He reminded her in a low voice, "She's quite lucky. She didn't suffer a huge loss. Just remember this. Also, I didn't tell Brother Haijing about today's matter. Don't be happy too early." Luo Nan felt stifled when he saw Baiyu's relieved appearance. This girl didn't know how many people were tormented by this matter tonight. He coughed lightly. "You guys need to pay attention. Xia City hasn't been peaceful lately. It seems like some sort of virus is spreading. My sister is also in this circle of yours. It really is very complicated. The more you make friends like this, the more cautious you need to be. Otherwise, you'll be caught off guard. I'll help you guys get in touch later. You guys can all go get your bodies checked." Baiyu's eyes widened once more when she heard the arrogance of his age and seniority. She hated that she couldn't open her mouth and bite a certain someone. But at this time, God's off-road vehicle accurately stopped outside of Baiyu's house. Luo Nan didn't give Baiyu a chance to speak. He drove the two girls out of the car and drove away. Behind him, Baiyu fiercely waved her fist at the taillights of the car. Luo Nan could only shrug and look at his watch. It wasn't even 9 o'clock in the evening. Their schedule was quite frugal. That's right. Ever since He Donglo's request for cooperation was rejected by him, the rest of the meal relied entirely on Shi Wei's top-notch level of communication. Only then were they able to enjoy themselves to the fullest. The duration of this meal wouldn't be too long. It ended around 7:30 p.m. Then came the examination of Clara and sending her off. Most of the time was spent on the road. Luo Nan sighed and rubbed his head. His thoughts weren't particularly smooth. He felt that it was strange when they talked about cooperation during the meal. The relationship between He Yueyin and the He family seemed to be a bit more distant than he imagined. He Yueyin was clearly the one who transferred the invitation this time as a middleman. Ever since the lecture on the 14th, Luo Nan's private communications had always been in a friend and family mode. Anyone who wasn't in his address book would automatically be rejected. It was all thanks to He Yueyin that He Donglu was able to contact him. And it was because of this that Luo Nan looked down upon He Donglu, or perhaps the He family behind He Donglu, who wanted to start a new business. If it weren't for the fact that the young master of the He family had resolved the winter solstice challenge, Luo Nan wouldn't even be bothered to smile at He Yueyin. Luo Nan pondered for a moment. He felt that he still needed to communicate with He Yueyin. At the very least, he needed to report today's situation. He directly dialed He Yueyin's Hexier number. This time, the call connected very quickly. "Mr. Luo? Sister Yueyin, I've met with He Donglu. The greeting gift he gave me was quite good. He resolved the matter of Gym Master Shio's Winter Solstice Challenge. However, looking at his intentions, he wants to obtain the technical authorization for the brick, produce it, and sell it on the market." I didn't agree. The so-called brick was the bracelet mentioned during the meal. It was the imitation dynamo core device that Luo Nan had designed for the sake of consolidating the results of the blood intent ring. Why did he choose this code name? One reason was because the blood intent ring's original name was Fortress. It could be considered a brick and a tile when dismantled. The other reason was because Luo Nan was ridiculing himself. The technical content of this toy wasn't high. Luo Nan felt that it wasn't even comparable to the elementary dynamo core product in Gym Master Shio's Tai Chi ball. It was barely at the level of the integrated chip that imitated the functions of the dynamo core and the burner simulator system of Frost River reality. It had a weak structure, a single function, a low-quality product rate, and a high failure rate. The frame of the blood intent ring was still floating in the abyssal region. It did have a bit of a guiding effect. Otherwise, it would have been too heavy to use as a toy. From Luo Nan's perspective, this brick was the most standard of failed products. It had the backing of the virtual brain system. It had a detailed user manual as a foundation. He had copied and copied, but the first product he created was actually this toy. He himself was ashamed to the point of being flustered, let alone others. So when Donglu brought up the matter of cooperation with this thing, Luo Nan felt that it was a slap in the face from his perspective. Even if Yueyin wasn't there to separate them, he would still pass it in the first instant. Yueyin did not inquire about the reason or the details regarding Luo Nan's decision. This was her special quality that made people feel comfortable. She absolutely wouldn't waste her breath on things that had already happened. She just used the most practical angle to cut in and seek a more appropriate solution. Donglu is just expressing his attitude. There's no harm in refusing. It won't affect the He family's overall attitude. I remember Mr. saying that you wish to further perfect the design of the brick. If the current research and development conditions provided by the branch are able to satisfy your needs, then there's no need to be in a hurry to deliver the results. We can avoid being distracted. Luo Nan felt that Yueyin had spoken to the bottom of his heart. With 2 hours of dinner time tonight, he could do anything. Of course he could cut off the winter solstice challenge. This bit of price was worth it. Luo Nan naturally had to express his gratitude. In any case, I will certainly be indebted to you for helping me resolve Gym Master Xiu's troubles. I've spoken to Donglu. Sister Yueyin, you might as well help me pass on the message. Luo Nan's words actually contained the meaning of, I only recognize you from the He family. It could be considered a small gesture of support. But Yueyin just replied, Donglu only needs to say it once. Besides, this is what the He family should do. Luo Nan didn't understand these words. Then Yueyin changed the topic. Mr. Luo, I've already sent over the latest information regarding the investigation of the mutant infection. It mentions that although Lan Lin is a carrier of the virus, the relevant departments have already made him harmless after the incident at the municipal plaza on the 17th of last month. We can basically eliminate the possibility of him becoming a source of transmission again. Chapter 585. It was already 9:45 p.m. by the time Luo Nan walked into the house. The clear sound of the zither passed through the door and entered his ears before he even entered the door. The subtle sound of him opening the door was also completely drowned out by the bright and lively sound of the strings being plucked. It was to the extent that in the living room, besides Roy Wan, who was sitting in a standard posture on the piano stool facing the door, no one else noticed his arrival. A family concert? Even though Luo Nan's mood couldn't be considered all that great, he still relaxed a bit. He quietly changed his shoes in the entrance hall and walked into the warm living room. Right now the entire family was gathered around the sofa in the living room, aside from Luo Nan who had just returned. His uncle and aunt sat on the main sofa, shoulder to shoulder, with their backs against the door. Only the back of their heads was exposed. Mo Peng sat on his aunt's side. He rested an arm on the armrest and swayed back and forth, but his body was sprawled on the carpet. He was very comfortable. But in terms of comfort, it still belonged to Moya, who occupied one side of the sofa and the chaise lounge. This sister didn't have a proper posture when lying down. She didn't have a proper posture when sitting. Her slender waist rested on the armrest. Her long legs were half bent and half straight. She was so idle that it made one's hair stand on end. Yet she still held the guitar. Her fingers and the plectrum plucked the guitar strings back and forth. She was as agile and dazzling as ever. This song was adapted from a classic rock song. Moya had returned to her old profession and was in charge of the melody. Luo Nan listened to this part. The interludes and gorgeous polyphonic interpretation, and even the finger-picking techniques were used. The rich timbre and improvisational variations perfectly verified the high validity of the nickname, Finger Palace. Compared to Emoya, Roy Wen sat upright under the cover of Emoya's gorgeous melody. Not only was her posture much more rigid, she mostly strummed the strings, and she occasionally broke down the chords back and forth. She also appeared much simpler. However, the metal strings beneath her fingers vibrated slightly. The resonant amplification of the single-panel box allowed the deep and penetrating timbre to be divined out. This was probably the best standard that the mid-range practice guitar in her hands could achieve. What was even more beautiful was the precise control. It could be said that she had firmly grasped Emoya's nearly casual and colorful rhythm. So much so that Luo Nan was nearly unable to distinguish whether the rhythm carried the melody, or whether the melody carried the rhythm. The song was quite simple, but it was almost perfect for two guitars. At the end of the song, before Emoya could comment, Mo Peng was already cheering loudly and praising, Roy Wen's rhythm is unparalleled. I.O. Speak properly. Luo Shuqing slapped her son's scalp. Mo Peng didn't even have time to complain when Roy Wen stood up from the piano stool. She nodded her head in greeting towards Luo Nan. Only now did the others see Luo Nan enter the door. Luo Shuqing also stood up. She looked up at her watch and frowned. It's almost 10 o'clock. You've been wandering outside all day. How did you learn from Mo Peng? Mom. Mo Peng was just about to prop himself up, but he didn't have any strength left. He was filled with grief and indignation. I go home on time every day. Why aren't you worried that Nanster will lead me astray? Go upstairs and sleep. Luo Shuqing gave her son a light kick. She had the heart to instruct Luo Nan a few more times, but when she thought of the special circumstances her nephew was in right now, she was unable to continue for a time. Luckily, her husband spoke up at this time. It's already 10 o'clock. Roy Wen has practiced the piano for nearly 2 hours. She must be tired. Everyone should go to sleep. Yep. Nan needs to adapt to the new rhythm as soon as possible. You're still young. Learning to enrich yourself and laying down your foundation is the most important thing. You need to calm your heart. Luo Nan obviously knew what his two elders were worried about. He went, yep. He didn't make any empty promises. He was just like he was in the past. He was an introverted and quiet child. If he could really be the same inside and out, then that would be the most gratifying result for his aunt and uncle. Okay. Everyone wash up and go to sleep. Roy Wen can consider going on stage with me this weekend. Emoya stood up as well. She grabbed her guitar and stretched her back. She even waved her hands twice in passing, emitting a humming sound. Luo Shuqing couldn't find her daughter pleasing to the eye no matter how she looked at it. Going up with you to swing a sledgehammer? If we really do swing, then we'll be excellent idols. Emoya walked barefooted, giggling as she walked upstairs. She was completely unaware that her unintentional words had caused Luo Nan to subconsciously frown. 5 minutes later, Luo Nan knocked on Emoya's door. A few seconds passed before Emoya opened the door for him. She wore only a thin nightgown and her hair draped over her shoulders. She clicked her tongue twice. What a rare guest. It seems like a certain someone hasn't come to visit since he's no longer lacking in funds. That must be the reason why you ran away from home for nearly 2 months. The corner of Luo Nan's lips twitched as he retorted. He walked straight inside. He wasn't in the mood to joke around with Emoya. Emoya indicated for him to sit on a chair by the window. She sat on the edge of the bed with her legs bent. She casually fiddled with her hair. What's wrong? You look like you're suffering from a deep hatred. Did you hear some annoying news from your circle? You could say that. It was easy to talk with smart people. Plus, Luo Nan didn't have any misgivings about many things since he exposed a few of his true circumstances. He didn't need to beat around the bush. My circle is fine. But it's best to be a bit more careful when you're in your circle. There's news that there, to be exact, in your company, there's at least one, maybe many virus carriers. HIV. It's even worse than that. Luo Nan extended his hand and gestured at Moya's head. Something that can grow horns on your head, cover your body in scales, and grow a tail on your butt. Moya was stupefied. Then she reacted, mutant? In this era, the threat that mutants could bring about, from reality to rumors, were all sorts of assaults that disturbed people's thoughts. Moya's reaction wasn't out of the ordinary. Luo Nan recalled the information he had just obtained from the branch's data. He felt that it was useless to talk about these things too much. It was most important to let Moya clearly understand where the source of danger was. Your company has already confirmed that the infected and carrier is Ji Cheong. Of course, she's already under control. There's also a suspected case right now. We're currently tracking and controlling it. Yeah. It's that excellent idol, Lan Lin. Ji Cheong? Lan Lin? Moya pondered for a moment. A smile rippled from the corner of her lips. I have a rough idea. It seems that this virus is transmitted through sexual channels. Couldn't women be a bit more reserved these days? Luo Nan choked for a moment. He was a bit speechless towards Moya's sensitivity, but he still had to say what needed to be said. It's basically like this. But we can't eliminate the possibility of other routes of transmission. I'm mainly worried about your band. They don't pay attention to their private lives. According to our intelligence, Electro-Harpies has been quite active recently. You're too close to them. You must be careful. It's best if you rest for a while. TSK. Your circle is quite professional when it comes to intelligence. It doesn't seem like you're messing around. You guys are the ones who are messing around. I don't deny it. Moya spoke casually. She naturally straightened her toes and did a sideways stretch. It was quite normal, but her current attire and posture made the corners of Luo Nan's eyes twitch. Hey, I'm being serious. I'm being very serious too. You want me to be careful and keep my distance. You want me to call for help if I encounter any problems. I want to be a bit less active recently. Isn't that all? Also, do a body check. Luo Nan sent an address to Moya. Make a trip here. Investigate the risks, just in case. You've thought quite thoroughly. A scholar who hasn't seen for 3 days has a whole new level of respect for you. Moya returned to her cross-legged sitting position. Her body leaned forward slightly. Then how did you think about the matter with Roy Wen? Roy Wen? Luo Nan couldn't turn his train of thought for a time. What's wrong with Roy Wen? You arranged Roy Wen's grade and class. Did you pay attention to her studies or her mental state? Luo Nan still didn't understand. She's only been at school for a few days. Is she tired of studying? Luo Nan spent all day with Roy Wen at Acumen College. He didn't discover anything abnormal. He didn't believe that anyone could discover any changes in Roy Wen's mental state. The smile on Moya's face faded. I want to ask. How can a child with only 3 to 4 years of memories keep up with the 7th grade curriculum? Luo Nan opened his mouth to speak, but he was unable to make a sound for a time. That's right. He knew that Roy Wen's relatively clear life memories were only about 3 years. At most, it wouldn't exceed 5 years. And within that time, the laboratory and the fighting arena made up nearly all of her elements. Of course this was abnormal. But Luo Nan knew that Quantum Corporation had installed special equipment in Roy Wen's brain when he rescued her from Jack's hands. It was used to control accidents. Under these circumstances, modifying and erasing memories wasn't something hard to understand. The relevant research of the Xia City branch also showed that it was practically impossible to form a complete personality with 3 to 5 years of memories. So there was reason to suspect that Roy Wen should have possessed a relatively mature behavior pattern early on. It was just that the relevant memories were all erased by Quantum Corporation. Roy Wen's current situation was formed on this basis. With Quantum Corporation's methods, the only way to find out about Roy Wen's past situation was to flip through their database. But there was already a slim chance of completely recovering her past memories. It was useless to tell Moya too much about this complicated matter. Moya's focus wasn't on this. She only has 3 to 4 years of memories, and she only has the ones from the underground fighting arena. This means that Roy Wen's learning foundation is practically zero. Even though she's very smart, it would be very difficult for her to catch up in a short amount of time. What's more, everyone can see that her energy and interest aren't on this. Luo Nan could only admit it. That's right. I don't really understand the situation in your circle. I can only ask you, do you think she'll be able to live a normal life in another 10 years with the current trend? What I mean is that she'll have a normal social circle. She'll become a complete person in society. She won't just live on a certain side. Why do I feel like you're talking about her being a gangster? Though Luo Nan said this, he felt quite diffident in his heart. Roy Wen's current abilities were more than enough to live on. But if she were to live freely in society with a complete personality, Luo Nan couldn't imagine such a scene for the time being. Chapter 586. Luo Nan came out from Moya's room. His eyebrows were locked. He had originally come to warn Moya. He never thought that he would end up with a head full of thoughts. He understood Moya's intentions. This sister saw Roy Wen's talent in music and wanted to bring this little girl into the profession. Luo Nan had to admit that Moya had a good eye. The essence of music was organized sounds. Any sound could be summed up as the vibration of an object. And Roy Wen's body and soul were mixed together. Inside and outside were one. This was the highest form of vibration that Luo Nan could currently recognize. This realm of using simplicity to control complexity was indeed a talent that no one could reach when used in the path of music. The technical discussion could be discussed later. Luo Nan was thinking that rather than letting Roy Wen painstakingly catch up to her peers and forcefully assimilate into normal society, it would be better to display her strong points and put on a layer of disguise in the normal world. Roy Wen was still young. He could wait and let her decide for herself. But he thought a bit more. With Roy Wen's temperament, she might not be able to express her thoughts clearly even if she had them. Preparing for a rainy day wasn't wrong. Luo Nan thought too much. His mind was a bit muddled. Legally, Mo Haihang and Luo Shuqin were Roy Wen's guardians. But in reality, Luo Nan was the one who truly needed to bear the responsibility. Any decision he made could affect Roy Wen's entire life. This was real pressure, and there was no outlet for it. Perhaps only by watching Roy Wen slowly form her ideal appearance would he have the chance to breathe a sigh of relief. Luo Nan walked toward his own room. He had just taken 2 steps when he subconsciously turned his head. He saw that the door to the small room on the west side of the 2nd floor was closed. He hesitated for a moment, but he still walked over. He hesitated in front of the door for half a second. In the end, he decided not to be hypocritical. He skipped the process of knocking on the door and pushed it open to enter. This was Roy Wen's room. The room wasn't large, but it was decorated with care. It was mainly a warm and simple beige color, probably to neutralize Roy Wen's cold colors. This was the handiwork of his aunt and Moya. There was no one in the room right now, but Luo Nan didn't find it strange. He continued to walk inside. The biggest reason he chose this room for Roy Wen was that there was a small, open balcony on the west side of the 2nd floor. Roy Wen was on the balcony right now. Luo Nan entered the balcony. The first thing he saw wasn't Roy Wen, but Ink, the enormous bald crow. It hooked its claws on the edge of the balcony railing and spread its wings, making a rustling sound. It had been a long time since this guy took medicine, but under the nourishment of the closed production line, its body grew larger and larger. Its claws and wings were powerful, and its feathers were glowing. If it wasn't for its short and blunt beak, people would believe that it was an eagle when it spread its wings and flew. Yes, this small balcony of about 4 to 5 square meters was Ink's new residence, and it was the most convenient place for Roy Wen to hook up with it. Beyond Ink's half-spread wings, a crescent moon hung in the western horizon, casting down dim light that decorated this dark domain. Looking further down, he saw Roy One. Under Ink's wings, the girl leaned against the railing of the balcony and sat on the ground with her legs bent. Just like Emoya, she wore a thin shirt that exposed her calves and bare feet. The cold of the winter night had no effect on her. Roy Wen's eyes were closed, and she still held the practiced zither in her bosom. She casually plucked the strings, and the soft and cool melody of a single note was like a breeze in the night. It brushed across Luo Nan's face, causing a wave of subtle tremors to rise on his skin. But when he carefully experienced it, it was like the rippling ripples of a river. It was so clear that the bottom could be seen, but there was a vacant emptiness within. Luo Nan could sense the regular deformations of the vibrational waves of the metal strings as they penetrated through the texture of the zither board, but he was unable to experience the part that belonged to a person under this transparent and clear tone. He was already used to this sort of Roy One, but Emoya's words crossed his mind. He couldn't help but have a different feeling grow in his hair. The balcony was very small. It could only fit Roy One by herself. Luo Nan didn't move forward. He stopped at the junction between the room and the balcony, and he half knelt in front of Roy One. Roy One must have felt Luo Nan approaching her, for she opened her eyes. Her deep and serene pupils were bottomless, and he couldn't see the emotions that a normal person should have. It was just like the sound of the zither flowing under her fingers. Luo Nan was a bit dazed when he saw these eyes. Right now Roy One was like the silent curtain of night outside the balcony. She was perfect like a painting, but she had completely blended into the background. There wasn't a single vivid focus. Her thoughts, hobbies, inclinations, ideals, and even her selfish desires were all buried beneath these dark pupils. Or perhaps there was simply nothing beneath them. What could be assembled from 3 or 4 years of memories? Not even a bit of it was forgotten. Jack. The underground fighting arena. The laboratory. Death. Luo Nan didn't want to think any deeper. The matter was far from being as simple as it was when he first made his decision. Perhaps Roy Wen's way of surviving in society had never been a difficult problem. It was how to let her live a high quality of life. Just like all parents hoped, to let their children live freely, happily, and with dignity. This was the crux of the problem. But could the Roy One before his eyes really do it? If she couldn't, then how should he adjust? Luo Nan was really a bit stupefied. He was in a daze, and Roy One just looked at him like this. Her fingers were still plucking the strings, but it was a subconscious action. Right now Roy One was like a robot doll waiting to be inputted with commands. That, Luo Nan spoke half a sentence, and his mind became even more stuffy. His originally unformed words were completely blocked up. The void vibrated during his moment of stupor. The minute signs were like the sound of thunder from the distant sea and sky. It was very hard for ordinary people to hear, but it transmitted information from the restless lagoon. This was someone's summons, telling Luo Nan that he had arrived. Hurry up and fulfill the contract. The plucking stopped. Of course Roy One could feel the vibrations in the void. She had gotten used to it over the past few days, so she put down the guitar and made preparations for her next move. Ink felt the change in the atmosphere and spread its wings to fly up. The scene in the curtain of night turned from stillness to stillness, and Roy One turned from a doll to a soldier on standby. She was no longer in a daze. But was this the state that a girl should be in? Then again, what should a normal girl, no, a normal state be like for someone of the same age? It seemed that Luo Nan himself didn't have a set of rules. Luo Nan really couldn't think of what to do next. He got up in a bit of a sorry state. Yeah. Let's finish tonight's practice first. Roy One nodded slightly. Her figure turned incorporeal, and she merged into the depths of the curtain of night right before Luo Nan's eyes. Luo Nan was stupefied for a few seconds before he picked up the guitar that Roy One had tossed onto the balcony. He carried it back into the room, gently leaning against the wall as he put it down. He didn't grasp the angle of the guitar well when he put it down, and the body of the guitar collided with the wall. The guitar let out a buzzing vibration, turbid like his current mood. Half a minute later, Luo Nan lay on the bed in his room. He closed his eyes, and his terrible mood slowly settled down. What replaced it was a clarity and calmness that gradually approached instinct. Luo Nan's mind broke through the cage, piercing through the turbid mental region of the public. He entered the lagoon, a similarly chaotic and even more berserk domain. In the lagoon, the power structure that came from Ghost Eye was like a shining lighthouse amidst a violent storm. It marked the position and depth of extraordinaries, and it issued a provocation to Luo Nan, come. Let's fight another 300 rounds. After the 14th lecture ended, Ghost Eye Che-E displayed his specialty in being shameless. He claimed to have lost the wager and willingly stayed in Xia City to serve as Luo Nan's sparring partner. She wanted to squeeze out elements that could be used by Luo Nan from the cage theory that Luo Nan had elucidated and put into practice. She wanted to improve her own foundation and seek a new breakthrough. This was the judgment of Her Majesty Empress Wu. There was a 70 to 80% chance that it was true. For an extraordinary to cast aside his pride, there really weren't many people in this world who could do anything to him. Ghost Eye stayed in Xia City as he wished. In the outer seas, he trained with Luo Nan in the lagoon every night. No matter what his intentions were, Luo Nan needed a sparring partner like this. He needed it more than anyone could imagine. Luo Nan didn't immediately step forward to meet Ghost Eye's provocation. Instead, he calibrated his position and locked onto the depths of this chaotic storm zone. There was another target drifting erratically, and he poured the strength of his mind into it. A rigid barrier towered in an instant, and the impact of the storm was greatly reduced. Luo Nan entered the fortress constructed by the configuration of the Ring of Blood Intent. This structure was still simple and crude. It was the standard big, stupid, and thick. Compared to Ghost Eye's extraordinary domain that spanned across the storm, it was quite lacking. But it was this kind of structure that formed the necessary foundation for Luo Nan's assault on the lagoon region. It was like a ship. It could carry a crew, and it could travel amidst the howling winds and huge waves. As Luo Nan's telepathy entered the fortress, the 100 or so telepathic thoughts that had been rather quiet within the area surrounding the fortress quickly became restless. The corresponding information was sprinkled to every corner of Xia City through the psychic wave network and a few other channels. In the blink of an eye, telepathic thoughts gathered one after another from every region of Xia City. Most of them were transferred through the psychic wave network. There were also a few who came through the bracelet that Luo Nan had distributed 2 days ago. In any case, the number of telepathic thoughts that came from different people within the fortress broke through the 500 mark in a short dozen seconds. This was pretty much the total number of ability users who could enter the fortress through the configuration of the Ring of Blood Intent after lesson number 14. Due to the pressure of the lagoon region storm and the limitations of the extremely simple configuration, a considerable portion of ability users had their consciousness in a half-muddled state after entering the fortress. It was very difficult for them to communicate with others. They only retained their basic perception abilities. Only a few B-rank mental users, such as Gao Meng and Bamboo Pole, could maintain the flow of telepathic thoughts to communicate. But no one was chatting with Luo Nan at this time. For the 500 ability users within the fortress, every second in the lagoon region was incomparably precious. And Luo Nan and Ghost Eye's attack drill was a carnival that belonged only to them. That's right. This was a carnival. Luo Nan borrowed the strength of the fortress to blast Ghost Eye with his first shot. He pushed against the energy turbulence of the lagoon region, transmitting the destructive shock several dozen kilometers away. Chapter 587. The revelry didn't last too long. Approximately 30 minutes later, the supernatural attack from Ghost Eye above the abyss region was like the receding tide of seawater. It receded layer by layer until it was far beyond the limits of human perception. At the same time, Luo Nan, who was leading the operation of the fort, had his spirited aura vanish into the void. It was indistinct and undetectable. The evening demonstration ended here. Some of the ability users within the fort withdrew their consciousnesses. Some wanted to stay for a while longer. It was fine even if they just wanted to experience the feeling of the Abyss region. As for the latter, they only needed around 100 people to barely support the fort. If they had less than this number, they could only go back to their homes and find their own mothers. Speaking of which, the standard of 100 people was nothing. For the ability users who were fortunate enough to participate in this matter, most of them were able to experience the magnificence of the Abyss region in advance with a C-rank standard. They could ponder over the marvels of their own domain. Such a good thing was something they didn't even dare to dream of 5 days ago. It was only within the boundaries of Xia City that Teacher Luo was keeping watch. It was only because of the incomparably marvelous ring of blood that they were able to construct this fort, that they had this opportunity. At this very moment, the ability users of the Xia City branch, of course, were the lucky ones who participated in number 14 Luo Nan's lecture. They were the targets of envy, jealousy, and gnashing of teeth from the entire world. Just this sense of superiority was enough to bestow them with powerful motivation. Even though Luo Nan's bracelet had yet to be popularized, the cost of using the SVIP model of the psychic wave network was not cheap. The ability users of Xia City still relied on their surging enthusiasm to continue the operation of the fort until the latter half of the night. Only when most people were exhausted of energy and were forcefully kicked out of the psychic wave network did the fort stop. Early in the morning, the cold air and the morning mist of the seaside mingled together and swept through the city. The neon lights of the business district still illuminated the city's sky. A certain person who persisted to the end left a message on the forums of headquarters. I pulled an all-nighter in the fort again. I'm so tired. Then he fell into a sweet dream amidst the howls of Kill Xia Chui that filled the mountains and plains. He had no reaction to the sound of cars that gradually grew denser outside the window. A commercial vehicle that had been parked in the residential district for half the night started up and slowly drove out. The car itself was very ordinary, but the interior of the car was completely modified according to the layout of a high-end business car. Other than the driver's seat in the front, the middle and rear parts were completely open, with only 2 seats side by side, suitable for sitting or lying. The main color of the carriage was dark red. Most people were not used to this color, but the 2 people in the carriage were already used to this environment. Enlu wore a suit with her legs together as she sat on the right seat, looking like a white-collared office worker. Her amber glasses couldn't conceal her beauty, but it changed her temperament a little. She operated the car's audiovisual system to display the updated electronic chart and said softly, "We've already conducted 2 rounds of observation on the targets recommended by Multifaceted." From the looks of it, he was indeed able to enter the abyss and carry out his consciousness activities. But the range is very limited, just like the devout believers of the Order who have received the installation of the Sanguine Flame's willpower, they have ascended for a short period of time. Madame Halder gave the final answer. After a month, the leader of the Sanguine Order had once again set foot in the territory of Xia City. Right now, she was sitting on the left-hand side of the seat. Her face was expressionless, but she stuck out her pinky out of habit. Her blood-red fingernail lightly scratched the old wound on her cheek, feeling the slight itch and pain. Enlu blinked her eyes behind her glasses. Even though Madame Halder was the first to blade him, what she said just now was a bit out of line. She lacked reverence for the Sanguine Flame's willpower. She was too close to the control faction. However, Enlu didn't say anything. She continued to analyze the information, corroborating with Madame Halder's opinion. The car drove out of the residential district and followed the flow of traffic through the city of Xia City. Approximately 10 minutes later, in between reports, Enlu looked out the window and said softly, "The central station is up ahead." Madame Halder also shot a glance out the window. She didn't say anything, but she took over the control of the audiovisual system. She cut off the chart and replaced it with an image from the surveillance system of Xia City. The date was the night of the 14th of this month. The image had already been processed to mark out a special existence within the flow of people. Actually, even without the marking, Madame Halder and Enlu could quickly identify the target. They were all too familiar with the figure's back, including the clothes. Enlu promptly switched to the main topic. "We're still checking the surveillance system of the station, but the target should be avoiding the cameras on purpose. We haven't found any valuable clues for now. She stumbled a bit, but in the end, she still chose the neutral word target. Madame Halder didn't open her mouth from beginning to end. She just replayed the surveillance image over and over, all the way until the car passed through the city and arrived at a shipyard on the eastern coast of Xia City. This shipyard was the property of Xia City's City Defense Army. There was a sentry every few steps. The security was tight. But when Madame Halder's business car drove out of the security zone, there were already military guides waiting for them. They brought them into the factory. The road was green, and they passed unimpeded. Enla sighed in her heart. The Blood Flame Order had always maintained a relatively close cooperative relationship with the military. Even though Tian Bang had relied on the resources of Team AB and the field army to catch them unprepared, the Order's deep-rooted network of relationships in Xia City for dozens of years had not completely collapsed. However, this network of relationships was like a rootless duckweed. Even a high-level member of the Order like Enla found it hard to accurately estimate how much longer it could last. The car drove all the way to a certain shipyard by the sea. This was originally a spare factory for assembling coastal warships. Most of the equipment here had already been discontinued. They only borrowed the special environment of the shipyard to store a special creation that was hauled back from the sea. Madame Halder and Enla got out of the car one after another. They only needed to raise their eyes to see the ash-gray hill floating in the sea below the shipyard. This hill was 15 meters high above the water's surface. Its complete volume was enormous, and its main structure was pieced together from all sorts of skeletal fragments. These bones were mostly fish bones, but they were abnormally tough. It was clear that they were the remains of a mutant. The method of piecing them together was very crude. Sharp spikes could be seen everywhere. If someone were to bump into it, there was a high chance that they would be pierced through by 10,000 arrows. This hill was the most obvious trace of the sea region where Jean Tong had either disappeared or died half a month ago. It was still a ghastly white in the video data. As time passed, the bones continued to change color. But in any case, it looked rather strange and frightening. Enla had just sized it up a few times when someone called her. She swept her eyes over the number and immediately took 2 quick steps forward. She moved closer to Madame Halder's ear and said, "Sky General Entertainment. They're most likely here to discuss an acquisition." Madame Halder stared at the hill of bones. She simply waved her hand and walked forward. Enlu understood. She stopped where she was and spoke a few words with Madame Halder. After all, this wasn't a good time to negotiate. She simply set an appointment and hung up the phone. When she turned her head to look, Madame Halder was already being led by a military guide onto the workbench of the shipyard. She turned to the other side of the hill of bones. Enla sped up, wanting to catch up to Madame Halder. But as soon as she stepped onto the workbench and turned a corner, she saw a rather familiar skinny face. That person happened to be blocking Madame Halder's path and was smiling as he spoke. When Enla came over, his eyes lit up when he saw her dressed like an office lady. He winked at her and said, "Oh my, your order is always shouting about fighting and killing, but you never lack beauties. This person isn't inferior to you back then." Enlu opened her mouth, but a breath was stuck in her throat. She almost couldn't make a sound. It wasn't easy for her to catch her breath. She couldn't care about anything else. She immediately closed her legs and bowed. "Lord Ghost Eye. Why do you say I'm interested in meeting your order? That's a really cool way to address you." Ghost Eye was wearing a loose casual outfit and a pair of sneakers. He looked like an old morning jogger. He had a smile on his face and didn't look the slightest bit dignified as an extraordinary. But Enlu, who was right next to him, had a layer of cold sweat on her back. She had discussed with the military about a secret visit, but she just had to run into an extraordinary. Was this an accident, or was it something else? Compared to the uncouth Ghost Eye, Madame Halder was wearing a light gray retro windbreaker, a pair of goatskin gloves, and a silk scarf around her neck. She looked like a strong woman inspecting her own business, and she was indeed calm. Brother Che, you worked hard last night and came ashore early in the morning. Why are you here? Oh my, are you trying to make me do my best? Ghost Eye was still as uncouth as ever. He laughed and said, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Actually, I've been restraining myself lately. It's just that my neck has been cold. It's not very comfortable, so I decided to take advantage of the fresh air in the morning and go for a stroll. You don't believe me? If you don't believe me, you can come over and touch it. Ghost Eye's words were already quite unreliable, but Madame Halder actually took off her goatskin gloves and touched Ghost Eye's neck. She had a faint smile on her face. Your skin is warm. You don't feel too cold, or perhaps your meridians are blocked. Ghost Eye snorted, you're a Western woman with a high nose and deep eyes. Why are you talking to me about meridians? It's not that kind of feeling. It's like a blade being pressed against the back of my head. It's cold and sinister. TSK. It's not as comfortable as your little hand. Madame Halder ignored Ghost Eye's last words. She withdrew her hand and put on her gloves once more. She played down the situation and said, a blade pressed against the back of my neck. A murderous aura. Xia City has a free sparring partner like you. It's simply a business without any capital. Is there anyone who's dissatisfied with you? Chapter 588. Madame Halder and Ghost Eye sat on the workbench in the shipyard. It was as if they were talking in riddles, or as if they were old friends exchanging greetings. They did not exchange many words, and then, with smiles on their faces, they walked away, one going up, the other going down, and did not meet again. Enla followed behind Madame Halder. Aside from the initial greeting, she didn't say a word. She only knew that the two of them were talking about last night's drill in the Abyss area, but she couldn't guess the specifics. But what she could be sure of was that Madame Halder and Ghost Eye must have reached some sort of tacit understanding. Otherwise, why would they have to create a coincidental encounter in this military base for others to see when and where they could talk about such gossip? Enlil lowered her eyes. A month ago, she was only one of the 2 deputy officiants in the order. But now that the traitor, Ren Hong, was dead, she was undoubtedly the first in line to inherit the position of officiant. Her position in the order had risen to an unprecedented height. But when did Madame Halder and Ghost Eye get in touch? The two of them had such a close friendship, but no matter what kind of difficult situation they were in, Madame Halder never revealed anything. Why was that? Enla had a subtle feeling in her heart, but no matter what, the benefits were immediate. No matter how dire the Blood Flame Order was, having an extraordinaire appear and communicate with them in a friendly manner was an excellent card to play. The guiding personnel of the military were dumbfounded at this moment. To him, this was undoubtedly a very important piece of information. And when this information was sent to the military decision-makers, it would probably boost the Blood Flame Order, which was currently in a rather passive position in D City. Enla pondered over this in her heart, but since Madame Halder didn't say anything, she couldn't ask. A minute later, Ghost Eye, who had finished circling around the white bone mound, did not even say goodbye and just left. She finally calmed down and carefully observed the white bone hill that was right in front of her. In fact, the higher-ups of the Blood Flame Order had already analyzed the white bone mound from all sorts of images and information. This time, they were seeing the real thing in person to verify their previous analysis. Enla soon confirmed that 99% of the White Bone Hill structure was based on the Blood Soul Temple. As for the remaining 10%, it was just a deviation caused by the impact of the energy. Most importantly, even though it had been half a month, he could still vaguely feel the special spiritual waves radiating from it. Outsiders wouldn't be able to guess, but as the deputy officiant, Enla could tell at a glance that during the process of shaping the White Bone Hill, there had been an astonishing energy exchange. Within the church, this energy exchange was also called blood sacrifice. How could such a thing in such a form appear in the sea where Jean Tong disappeared or died? Could it be that it was really as some people had guessed, that the one who had already died in battle at the Aurora Cloud capital had revived using a secret technique? Enla did not voice out such a taboo guess. She remained silent until Mrs. Halder signaled for them to leave. Under the more cautious and respectful welcome of the military guides, the two of them got back into the MPV and drove out of the factory. In the car, Madame Halder had been resting with her eyes closed, or perhaps she was deep in thought. Only when they reached the highway did she open her eyes and speak. Luo Nan wants to kill someone. Yin Luo was suddenly stupefied. Her thoughts had been swaying between the White Bone Hill and Ghost Eye. She hadn't thought of Teacher Luo, whose name had already shaken the world even though he hadn't reached adulthood. She was a bit stupefied for a time. Luckily, she quickly came to her senses. Madame Halder and Ghost Eye had mentioned the drill in the Abyss region earlier. Luo Nan was the core character. But the matter of killing someone. Madam, who do you think Luo Nan wants to kill? Madame Halder took off her kid leather gloves and placed them on the armrest of her seat. Her right hand, which had just caressed the back of Ghost Eye's neck, opened and closed twice. She spoke a few seconds later. According to Ghost Eye's explanation, Luo Nan is using the drill and name to familiarize himself with the attack patterns of the Abyss region. In reality, he's using Ghost Eye as a simulated target. Since he's using Ghost Eye as a simulated target, it's very likely that the target is a mental type extraordinary. Yin Luo was speechless. She said after a while, even if he's practiced 100 or 1,000 times, he'll still kill extraordinaries as he pleases. Her voice suddenly cut off. Yin Luo thought of Jean Tong at this moment. Madame Halder's gaze stared at her own right hand. She muttered, Ghost Eye means that he can faintly sense a certain hidden threat. Perhaps that threat is Luo Nan's trump card in beheading Jean Tong. But Jean Tong is a fleshly type after all. It's very hard to completely imitate his previous experience. That's why he needs Ghost Eye as a live target. There are only 30 or 40 mental type extraordinaries under the heavens. Who could it be? Yin Luo didn't speak. She was still digesting Halder's judgment. Even though the logic was complete, it was still very hard for her to completely agree with it. Madame Halder didn't dwell too much on this matter. She most likely wanted to gather more information before making a judgment. However, she made a decision. Notify Sky General Entertainment. Let's shelve the negotiations over Mingtang Culture's acquisition. Madam? According to Multifaceted's explanation, Luo Nan and Mingtang Culture have quite a deep connection. We need to have a channel to facilitate contact. Yin Luo responded with a yes and immediately made a call to the negotiating side. She didn't care how astonished and angry the other side was. The matter was settled in less than a minute. When the call ended, Yin Luo was just about to ask for instructions when Madame Halder took the initiative to ask her, "What do you think about Ghost Eye?" Yin Luo was a bit startled. She didn't know what to say for a time. She simply shook her head. I haven't studied him in depth before. I don't dare to make a rash judgment. Madame Halder laughed soundlessly. She didn't bicker with Yin Luo. She continued, Ghost Eye seems to be frivolous, but he has everything an extraordinary should have. His judgment far surpasses that of a normal person. That's fine. When it comes to extraordinary cultivation, he's far more curious than the vast majority of extraordinaries. Correspondingly, he doesn't pay much attention to mundane matters. You need to remember this. Yin Li's heartbeat increased by a notch. There was no doubt that Madame Halder was deciphering the mysteries of Ghost Eye's relationship with her. To the Blood Flame Order, which lacked a core of extraordinaries and a sacrificial artifact to suppress them, this was an extremely important resource. Regardless of whether it was sooner or later, if she could learn the truth, it meant that Yin Li's position within the Order and in Madame Halder's heart had been further solidified. Yin Li felt as if she had returned to the time when she received the Order's fundamental secret technique. She listened attentively to Madame Halder's every word and committed them to memory. There wasn't much information regarding Ghost Eye. It was nothing more than contact information, communication skills, personality analysis, and so on. Madame Halder only took 2 minutes to finish explaining everything. In the end, she sighed with emotion. Ghost Eye is the kind of person whose curiosity is greater than his ambition. He likes to meddle in other people's business and care about old relationships. Out of all the extraordinaries, he's practically the most suitable to befriend and rely on. It's just that the more favors are used, the thinner they are. In recent years, I've needed him, but he hasn't needed me. Our friendship of 20 years can only withstand 2 or 3 troubles. If it goes any further, it'll most likely not last. Enla consoled, if we can get past this hurdle, the order will be promoted, and our status will be close. Perhaps, don't say these meaningless words. Madame Halder waved her hand. Rather than thinking about these useless things, it's better to think about how to clean up the loose ends in Xia City and open up the situation in T City. Enla choked up. She responded with a soft, yes. She couldn't continue for a time. The difficulties faced by the church after the relocation of their foundation had far exceeded their worst expectations. It had to be said that T City was an important city in the Pacific Ocean. Although it was far away from the major economic circles and was isolated overseas, it and Chan City were like horns to each other. They faced each other from a distance and just so happened to be 2 important strategic strongholds protecting the deep blue world. It was also one of the core offices of the current world government. The strategic location was admittedly good, but it was also a place where wind, clouds, dragons, and tigers converged. The government, the military, the capital, and the powers of the inner world intersected. For an outsider like the Bloodflame Order, it was far too difficult to take root there. Madame Halder had always viewed T City as an important backup base for the past decade or so. She had transferred many industries there and had a legal and reliable identity. But this could only guarantee their ability to survive in normal society. In the inner world, where power and foundation were valued, the Bloodflame Order was a secret order. Their foundation of believers was in a half-collapsed state. They were like rootless duckweed. If this was all, they could still immerse themselves in business and slowly plan. But they never expected that at this critical time, Chan City, which was supposed to be the most stable, would stir up trouble. The impact spread to T City as well. Gradually, there was chaos. Enlo understood that under these complicated circumstances, Madame Halder had put down the multitudes of affairs in T City and returned to Xia City. Aside from dealing with the loose ends of moving out of Xia City, there was also a large part of it. Madame Halder saw that the situation in T City was difficult and hoped to find some external power that she could borrow. Right now, Madame Halder had found Ghost Eye, but this wasn't enough. Several minutes of oppressive silence persisted in the commercial vehicle until news from the outside came in. Enlo received the latest intelligence from the Pacific Ocean. Calling it intelligence was a bit of a stretch. The news had just been released when it became the most explosive news in the inner world. The Ability User Headquarters and the Order of Justice have put aside their negotiations, but they immediately announced the news of a new plane to the outside world. Confirmed? What's the specific location? Enla felt a bit bitter in her mouth. Confirmed, but there's no specific location. We only suspect that it might be a subsidiary plane of the deep blue world. Madame Halder was silent. Enla paused. In the end, she couldn't help but speak again. T City is definitely within the exploration radius. According to the official exploration principles, the recruitment of personnel is imperative. There's also the expulsion and counterattack of the mutant species. Madam, our manpower and reserves can't afford to be tossed about. Chapter 589. Tomorrow was the winter solstice. It was the time of year when the night was the longest. The weather in Xia City hadn't been too good for some time now. At 5 o'clock in the evening, the sky had clearly darkened. Shadows flickered in the depths of the jungle on the north bank. Add to that the sharp or coarse cuz of the resident birds. Those who were a bit less courageous might not have the guts to walk on the forest paths. However, inside the gear building in the jungle, the public activity area on the second floor of the basement was brightly lit. Due to the lighting, the side of the waterway near the sandbar attracted quite a few fish and shrimps from the bottom of the lake. They stuck close to the glass wall and bumped into each other. As for whether it was interesting or strange, that would depend on the aesthetic of each person. None of the people who stayed here paid attention to this scenery. They sat around the bar counter, laughing and joking. The atmosphere was lively. Aha, serves you right. Shuelei drank a bit of alcohol. Since he wasn't of legal drinking age, he lacked experience in this area. It was inevitable that he would get a bit drunk. Of course, the most important thing was that the difficulty of the winter solstice challenge had silently melted away. A large chunk of his mind had been swept away, and his bold and cheerful vigor had returned to his body. His voice grew increasingly resonant. This is what happens when you want to eat alone. Let's not talk about what happens over there. Big bro, I am going to enjoy the profits from inside. The one who was grabbing Shuelei's shoulder was the CMO of Heavenly Crystal Biology R&D Company, Director Xia Junping. Shuelei's face was already red from the alcohol. This marketing director, who had been in office for a month, was the one whose face was truly flushed red. His face could practically light up half the bar counter. Haven't you seen the energy sector these past 2 days? It's been going straight up and down without any twists and turns. Getting a sum of money at this time is an extreme operation. Intelligence, decisiveness, ability, and luck are all indispensable. Or should I say, ever since I got to know you guys, my luck has been off the charts. Those people from headquarters are courting death. They actually wanted to hide this sort of thing, and they weren't able to hide it. Shuelei was already an outstanding member of the Xia City branch. His standpoint was extremely upright. He didn't hesitate in the slightest when he opened fire. Not many people knew about the storm that had suddenly arisen on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. The intelligence obtained by the Xia City branch only showed that Chan City's ability user headquarters and the Order of Justice had discovered a plane similar to the Deep Blue World for some unknown reason. It was said that the two sides were originally preparing to develop it in secret, but during the course of negotiations, such an important secret matter was inexplicably leaked. This sneak attack left both the Ability User Headquarters and the Order of Justice in a rather sorry state. Not only did they have to deal with the inquiries of various powers over the past 2 days, they also had to question the other party's ability to keep secrets and even their most fundamental attitudes. It was said that after the leak, the high-level talks between the two sides had ended on bad terms many times, and now the negotiations had been put on hold indefinitely, but the impact caused was hard to clean up. At first, everyone was a little confused, not sure if it was a fact or a rumor. Later on, even more detailed information was released, and there was even a piece of extremely critical and deadly information such as, the party involved does not have the exact coordinates. At this moment, everyone finally came back to their senses. You two haven't even figured out the situation yet, and you've already scratched each other's faces until they're covered in blood. It would be a waste not to see a joke, and it would be a waste not to take advantage. At that moment, the big and small investors all entered the market. Regardless of whether they could catch any fish or not, they had to muddy the waters first. The turmoil in the global stock market was just one side of it. Xia Junping, who was an outsider, had already taken the opportunity to take a bite out of it. Satisfied, he left to watch the show. But there were even more major forces and individual gamblers who were determined to be addicted to gambling for the rest of their lives. They were eager to get a few more pieces of meat on the Pacific Ocean, in the new dimension whose coordinates had yet to be determined. It's rare to be so free. Chinikuan, who had been diligently performing his duty, still didn't touch a drop of alcohol tonight, but he couldn't help but sigh at this moment. It must be said that Xia City had been in a state of chaos since the end of September. People from all walks of life rushed in and out of the city. They set up a stage to sing an opera. They tossed and turned with all their might. Now, the tables had turned. Whether it was headquarters or the Order of Justice, they had both fallen head first into the maelstrom. From the perspective of the people of the Xia City branch, such a situation was truly like a cold drink in the summer and a hot pot in the winter. It was a comfortable situation. He reached for the ice water in front of him. At this moment, Cat Eyes, who was temporarily acting as the bartender, called out from behind the counter. Jerry. With a whoosh, a fat brown figure leaped through the gap between Chinikuan's arm and the counter. It came to a screeching halt when it reached Cat Eye's. It stopped right in front of a cup of fruit juice that had just been concocted. It was a muskrat. Its iconic long tail was swinging on the table. Its tail was nearly 20 centimeters long. It was taller than the cup when it squatted normally. Since its head was small and its body was large, and there was no clear dividing line between the two, it looked quite fat. But among its kind, this size was still considered underage. It was already very close to Xia Junping and Xia Junping. Xia Junping was especially startled by it. But when Xia Junping turned his head and saw the big fat fellow in front of him, not only was he not annoyed, he laughed out loud instead. "See? I told you that this little fellow isn't an ordinary creature. I was screwed over by it back then." As he spoke, he reached out to touch it. However, the muskrat, who had been named Jerry, still maintained an extremely high level of vigilance. It twisted its body and circled to the other side of the cup. It even revealed its sharp incisors at Xia Junping. TCH, narrow-minded. Xia Junping still wanted to tease this little fellow, but Cat Eyes had already given him an order. "Send it to your mother." As Cat Eyes spoke, she gestured with her hands and pointed at the end of the counter where Rui Wen was sitting silently by herself. Jerry's flat head twisted back and forth twice, and its tail swung along with it. In the end, it actually lowered its body. Its front claws hooked onto the joint between the stem and the base of the cup. Its fat belly stuck to the table, and its long webbed hind legs exerted force. It advanced with difficulty towards Rui Wen in a nearly gliding manner. Its appearance was enough to make one howl. If Shui Lei had not pulled him back in time, Xia Junping really would have rolled over in laughter. This wasn't the first time Chinikuan had seen such a situation, but he still could not help but click his tongue in wonder. This isn't the intelligence a muskrat can have. Are you sure there aren't any abnormalities? The laboratory didn't find anything. Besides, as long as Rui Wen likes it, what problems could there be? What logic? Chinikuan was dumbstruck and speechless. The feeling faction and the reasoning faction couldn't be said together no matter what. At this time, a call came through. After Chinikuan took the call, he said a few words and then stood up. He turned his head and said, "Leister, help me move a few things." Shui Lei stood up. Xia Junping was not to be outdone. He swayed as he stood up, raised his hand, and said, "I'll help too." Chinikuan swept a glance at Xia Junping's physique. He didn't hold too much hope towards the results of this short month of training, but he still gave him a bit of face. He laughed and said, "2 people is enough. We'll be back soon." He pulled Shui Lei and rode the elevator up. Xia Junping was still a bit drunk. He was distracted for a moment and didn't follow. He could only sit down resentfully as he watched the elevator close. But when he turned his head, he saw Cat Eyes concentrating on mixing drinks. Rui Wen and Jerry were also in their own country. They didn't seem to care about anyone else. He felt that it was boring. He was also a bit scared. It was true that he liked beautiful women. Disregarding Rui Wen, Cat Eyes' image was very much his cup of tea. But the more he came into contact with the inner world, the more he understood the depths of it. It was best for him to stay as far away from such dangerous people as possible. Xia Junping simply got up again. He waited for the next elevator and went up as well. It was all right on the second underground floor, but when he reached the entrance hall of the first floor, the cold wind of the winter night blew and he couldn't hold on much longer. Finally, he still had a bit of reason left. He rushed to the edge of the small plaza in front of the door and vomited into the underbrush. Afterwards, his condition was much better. The strict training he had undergone during this period of time also showed results. He only wore a thin sweater and stood outside, but he didn't feel that cold. He surveyed his surroundings and borrowed the light from the door to illuminate the area. He could actually faintly see the depth of the jungle 6 to 7 meters in front of him. Even though it was still hazy, there were only two living things in that area, a bird and a beast. Neither of them could escape his senses. According to Dean Wan's words, he was already able to synthesize sound waves, smell, heat radiation, and many other perceptual differences. He was able to distinguish living things from the surrounding environment. According to the inner world's terms, this was spiritual sense. At this step, even though it was far from being an awakening, it could be said that he possessed a certain amount of extraordinary strength. Xia Junping could even barely tell that the bird that was slightly moving up and down on the branch was a crow. Of course, it was far inferior to ink. It seemed that his spiritual sense had improved again in the past 2 days. It was really smooth sailing. Yay! Xia Junping clenched his fists and jumped a few times in the cold wind to vent the excitement in his heart. Perhaps because his movements were too large, the crow at the edge of the forest tilted its head, as if it was sizing him up. Xia Junping whistled at the crow, but it didn't respond. Instead, at the end of the forest path on the other side of the plaza, Xue Lei's voice rang out. "Hey, why are you outside? I wanted to help, but I didn't expect you to run so fast." Xia Junping complained half-truthfully, but the next moment, he saw the sturdy and heavy metal box on Xue Lei and Qini Kuan's shoulders that was half the height of a person. The rest of his words turned into a strange cry. F***ck me. This isn't grass, it's a precision component that's about to be destroyed by our teacher Luo. I think his credit limit must be in the negatives again. That's not necessarily the case. The SVIP model usage fee is still quite considerable. Lei Zi, you put on the bracelet at the first moment. It's inevitable that a full man doesn't know the hunger of a hungry man. Qini Kuan unloaded the box that weighed several hundred kilograms from his shoulder like he was taking off his school bag and placed it in the hall. Only then did the box's load-bearing pulley come into play. Xue Lei did as he was told. Xia Junping came over and curiously touched the outer shell of the box, but he couldn't tell what it was. Chapter 590. No one took a crow that could be seen everywhere seriously. Xia Junping and the other two walked into the hall. The boxes weighing hundreds of kilograms made muffled sounds like thunder as they stepped on the ground. This is our teacher Luo. From Xue Lei's perspective, this bit of weight was nothing. But he had a problem with Luo Nan's way of doing things these past few days. It wasn't easy for me to get into the basics of Sans Ho. I've been messing up my schedule these past few days. I can't leave the front door, I can't take a step out of the back door. I'm probably going to slip down again, Xia Junping chuckled. He's reverting to his old ways. Didn't you say that he used to be like this? Qini Kuan pressed the button to open the elevator and sent the box inside. After turning around, he also joined in on the conversation. Of course, he was mostly explaining, Mr. Luo is also striking while the iron is hot. After all, with such an impressive result like the Ring of Blood and Will, and with Ghost Eye as a sparring partner, this is a rare opportunity that cannot be missed. Xue Lei displayed his stance. He fiddles with these exoskeletons every day just to strike while the iron is hot? Qini Kuan smiled and asked Xue Lei to move the other box into the elevator. At the same time, he raised his hand and shook it, showing the rather heavy metal bracelet on his wrist. This is also the result. As a physical body, I thought that I would never be able to touch the abyss in my life. I didn't expect Mr. Luo to be able to solve this problem so easily. This thing is now very popular. Xue Lei subconsciously shook his wrist. The weight on his wrist made him lose the confidence to continue speaking. He could only mutter, body and soul should be balanced. Such a good aptitude. Beep beep beep. The alarm of the elevator rang. After all, it was not a freight elevator. 2 metal boxes had actually exceeded the limit of 1,300 kilograms. All right, I'll use the one next to it. Xue Lei struggled to pull the box out again. At that moment, a call came through. Xia Junping helped him press the button. I'll go this way too. B6, right? After much difficulty, the elevator doors closed and the car descended. Shui Lei was on the phone the whole time. He hummed repeatedly and occasionally said words like Christmas or New Year's Day. By the time the elevator arrived, he still hadn't finished speaking. Xia Junping then helped Shui Lei pull out the box. At this time, Qi Nikuan was already waiting outside. He was swiping his authority, which was to verify his identity. Xia Junping felt a toothache when he saw this scene. A good portion of Gear's 7 basement floors were remodeled by Yan Heng during this period. Because he had always been engaged in highly classified research on the archetype format and the burners, these underground buildings had practically been transformed into a heavily guarded fortress by him. When Xia Junping and Luo Nan first came here, they suffered a loss due to the issue of authority. Whether it was him or Luo Nan, neither of them liked this sort of arrangement. They simply abandoned most of the defense systems when they took over. However, Luo Nan had clashed with headquarters last time, and gear had been severely damaged by headquarters tank and the others. They had no choice but to consider the issue of safety when they repaired it. Plus, Luo Nan had been using gear as a base for research these past few days. The corresponding defensive measures were reinforced layer by layer. This was especially true for the 6th floor, which was the main laboratory. The 7th floor, which contained the mainframe database, energy station, and other core installations, had already been built into a small fortress by the technical staff of the Xia City branch. It was said that according to these safety standards, even if an extraordinaire were to charge over, these 2 layers of the fortress would be able to hold out for 1 to 2 minutes. This was enough time for the Xia City branch to take the next step in providing reinforcements. Safety and convenience could not be balanced at the same time. The higher the safety factor, the lower the comfort factor. The 2 boxes of equipment parts were actually much simpler here. They were directly sent through a conveyor belt to the laboratory's warehouse for classification and inspection. The 3 of them just had to go through the inspection procedure step by step. They're really looking for trouble. Xia Junping had the authority to enter the laboratory, but he was seriously impatient with the complicated inspection process. At this time, he heard Shui Lei say, "The troublemakers are in the back." Tian Qi just called. He said that he couldn't get in touch with Nanster. He asked me to tell him that the Mystic Arts Research Society is going to conduct an end-of-year activity. They're going to organize a Mystic Arts theme week during Christmas and New Year's. The venue is set to be at Gear. Huh. According to Tian Qi, this should be a warm-up for the next semester's relocation. They want to take advantage of this opportunity to move some equipment over. All the functions that can be used have been activated, and the activity space has been expanded. F***CK. Why are these people causing trouble? Xia Junping raised his wrist. He wanted to make a phone call and clarify the situation. However, he didn't have the authority to communicate on the 6th floor. He couldn't make the call at all. Shui Lei advised, "It's hard to say even if we get in touch. After all, this isn't Nanster's private property. The property belongs to the Mystic Arts Research Society. We can't say anything about when they move and how they move." As he spoke, Shui Lei turned to look at the brand new security equipment around them. Maybe Nanster needs to find another workshop. There's definitely room for discussion here. As the person directly responsible for Luo Nan's security, Qi Nikuan's tone was calm and certain. He didn't feel that this was a problem. Xia Junping went, Only now did he remember that Luo Nan had the Xia City branch behind him. If he were to put on a show and to discuss with the Mystic Arts Research Society, the latter might not have any leeway to refuse. Levels. It was all a matter of levels. He also felt that this wasn't a big deal. It just so happened that the 3 of them had already passed their authority verification. He casually spat out, "Speaking of which, a workshop. Are you sure it's not a factory?" The 3 of them walked inside amidst their laughter. They passed through 2 more security gates before entering the core area of the laboratory. Upon entering, they discovered that behind the unfriendly and serious face of this laboratory was just a young and inexperienced rookie. The entire floor was completely empty. Not a single person could be seen. There were only a few multifunctional robots driving motors and carrying equipment. They buzzed through the corridors and the passageways on both sides. Even with the Xia City branch's vigorous support, the installation of various equipment was far from complete. Many spaces were still empty, or perhaps only a small portion of them had been completed. The only places that were truly in use were the warehouse where the 2 boxes of components were stored, as well as Luo Nan's current workspace. This wasn't the first time the 3 of them had come here. They walked inside with familiarity. Soon, they saw Luo Nan's figure at the end of the passageway on the right. However, this young genius who was famous for his mental senses didn't seem to have discovered their arrival. Luo Nan was standing in the middle of a pile of mechanical arms. He held an electronic pen in his hand and drew in the middle of the work area. Following his movements, a small portion of the dozen or so mechanical arms that were distributed within the space of over 100 square meters were flexing and moving. Each of them had a different division of labor. Some of them were moving equipment. Some of them were assembling and dismantling components. Some of them were even brazenly welding. It caused sparks to flicker within the work area. Qin and the others watched with twitching eyelids. Xia Junping was a bit stupefied. Does he really want to use this place as a factory? Shui Lei turned his head to look all around. How come I don't see worker Zhai? Qin answered, Worker Zhai is working overtime today. He didn't come. Shui Lei turned his head in shock. He nearly twisted his neck. Hey, is he operating it by himself? Qin grinned. There's a military-grade AI here. According to Worker Zhai, it's quite easy to use. It should be. It felt fine when I came over in the afternoon. Then the afternoon ended up like this? The corners of Shui Lei's eyes twitched. He stared fixedly at the figure within the forest of mechanical arms. He confirmed that there was no immediate danger before sweeping a glance at the clock to the side. The clock showed that Luo Nan had been working continuously for 7 hours. In other words, he had skipped at least half of this morning's classes. He's really gone mad. Speaking of which, is he going to use his mental senses to cheat on the final exam? If I had this ability a few years ago, I would have flown away a long time ago. Xia Junping blurted out a sentence, but he soon shifted the focus of his attention. That headband. Is it that extraordinaire? Yeah, it's the one from Jin Tong. Shui Lei confirmed Xia Junping's guess. The item they were discussing was fixed to a mechanical arm in front of Luo Nan. Its appearance was very unremarkable. If one didn't have a fixed view of it, it would have been mixed up with the many equipment components in the surroundings. Actually, Xia Junping didn't have a clear concept of the power of extraordinaires. However, this didn't prevent him from feeling deep veneration for this spoils of war that had been dyed with the blood of the world's top figures. Of course, he felt even more respect for the victor who obtained this spoils of war. I really didn't see it back then. Hey! Before Xia Junping could finish speaking, the headband that had attracted everyone's attention was pulled by the mechanical arm. It was placed squarely on top of Luo Nan's head. Xia Junping and the other 2 all saw it. The headband, which was originally quite wide, clearly shrank the moment it was placed on top of Luo Nan's head. The headband fit perfectly on Luo Nan's forehead. It fit perfectly, as if it was custom-made for Luo Nan. Luo Nan tossed away the electronic pen in his hand right after the headband was placed in place. This was like a signal. The surrounding dozen or so mechanical arms twisted their joints, pushing components and modules from various directions before Luo Nan. Then they began to equip themselves. The miniature energy furnace, chest and abdomen armor, the 4 limbs integrated modules, and other main structures had already undergone many adjustments. They were completely compatible with Luo Nan's figure. It only took 2 seconds to complete. Other parts such as the survival system, mounted weapons, and so on were put on his body one after another. In the blink of an eye, a fully armed deep blue walker appeared before their eyes. TSK. It's like watching a movie. A remake of Iron Man? It looks like it, right? It's just that its color is a bit plain, and it's on the skinny side. Compared to the relaxed attitudes of the two youngsters, Chinikuan, who was a professional, saw things a bit more. Strictly speaking, this exoskeleton equipment was slimmer than the standard version. Luo Nan should have removed a portion of the mounted equipment and even some parts of the armor. No matter what his goal was, this sort of modification was far too daring for a highly integrated and relatively mature combat platform. In actual combat. Before he could finish his thought, a buzzing vibrating sound rang within the workshop. This was the sign of the miniature energy furnace starting to heat up. The engine's power was rapidly rising. "Hey, test the machine here." The second half of Xie Juanping's words were shattered by the explosive sound of an explosion. A gale blew in front of the eyes of the three onlookers. The mechanical arms in the work area swayed back and forth. The idle components on the floor and stage were blown into a mess. The three of them were able to capture the trajectory of the movement. But by the time they turned their heads, the exoskeleton armor had already come to a stop on the other side of the large room. The wall that had just been painted was behind it. Chapter 591. He didn't. At most, he missed by 10 centimeters. And he even turned around. There was no need to talk about Shuelei's eyesight, but he felt a bit bitter in his mouth. This is the support of the exoskeleton. Luo Nan's displacement process of extreme static, extreme movement, and extreme stillness was too barbaric and direct, even though it was the least pressure. He had already awakened, and he had used the 9 orifices and 6 roots technique to stabilize the foundation of his body. If it were an ordinary person, they would have suffered from cerebral ischemia, internal organs would have been displaced, and tendons would have been fractured. But this kind of barbarity would be the ultimate impact and lethality in actual combat. Shui Nan pondered to himself. He could barely react to this speed and impact. He wouldn't be killed in an instant, but he would be in a state where he was wide open for 3 rounds at most. No technique would be of any use at that time. He could completely imagine the consequences of falling to the ground. Shuelei understood more and more now that Gym Master Xiao had painstakingly transferred his energy to human-computer interaction. Although he had gone to the simulation chamber to play a few rounds these past few days, his progress in the real world was clearly lagging behind. He needed to have a greater sense of urgency in the future. Shuelei felt that the same situation was a spur, but Chinikuan felt that it was more realistic. The exoskeleton emitted a buzzing sound of electricity. It was dense and not noisy. On one hand, it displayed a good body condition. On the other hand, it seemed to have a special mode of action. And at this time, he felt a slight itch on his skin that had yet to dissipate. It was as if he had been struck by static electricity. He looked at Luo Nan's feet. There were no traces of friction at all when he stopped and braked. He immediately understood. Electromagnetic fields. Speaking of which, the deep blue platform already has such a mature application. He had teamed up with God for some time. He had seen Maglev before, but he had never seen Luo Nan spin through the void like this. There was not a single trace of smoke and fire in the microcontrol effect. Luo Nan was certainly inferior to a professional soldier in terms of operating skills. This kind of effect was reflected in the transmission or control system. The two professionals each had their own thoughts. Xie Junping, an amateur, only looked at appearances. He saw that the outer layer of Luo Nan's body seemed to have a layer of flickering electricity circulating around it. He heard Chinikuan mention electromagnetic fields. He immediately thought of the information he had heard from Shuelei and the others these past few days. He slapped his thigh. Releasing magnetism and discharging electricity. Could it be Jean Tong's unique skill? Is this headband hiding that secret manual? Xie Juanping's idea came out of nowhere, but it was just right. Shuelei and Chinikuan were both stupefied to the side. Suddenly, they had the feeling of realization that something like this was possible. Speaking of which, Luo Nan had brought out quite a few things during this period of time. The cage theory could be said to be a consistent accumulation, but the many days of debugging and remodeling high-precision equipment allowed him to have a nose and eyes. Luo Nan had the mysterious flavor of an omnipotent capable person. Of course, Xie Junping was just making a wild guess, but it was also true. Only now did Luo Nan notice the three of them coming over. He stopped the experiment, took off the helmet, and walked over step by step, still wearing the headband. Although Xie Junping was a typical second-generation rich kid, he had very few opportunities to come into close contact with deep blue walkers. He immediately stepped forward, rubbed, and satisfied his craving. At the same time, he didn't forget to verify the hole in his brain, Nanster. Inside this headband, Luo Nan smiled at Xie Junping. He actually admitted it directly. It's more or less a reference to Jean Tong's model. It's an extraordinary power of electromagnetism. It's also the most universal ability that can be grasped at this stage. Hey, there's really something inside? It's yet to be excavated. Luo Nan used his fingertips to tap the headband, emitting muffled popping sounds. This attracted the gazes of the three to focus on the headband. But then he sighed, it's a pity that I can't use this mode for too long with the current strength of my fleshly body. Don't even think about using it in actual combat. I can only use it as a weight-bearing exercise. I can also use it as an experimental machine to verify a few ideas. It's already very strong, okay. Xue Lei had a relatively good understanding of the strength of Luo Nan's body. Even if I can't use that mode just now as my normal state, the short burst of a few dozen seconds is still extremely terrifying. If I'm paired with a blade, I'm dead for sure. Luo Nan still shook his head. If I'm up against an extraordinary, my speed still won't be able to display any advantage. If I were to face them head-on, not to mention anything else, just Jean Tong would be able to shatter both the machine and the person. I'm dead for sure. Xue Lei couldn't hold back from ridiculing. Who told you to go up against an extraordinary? Have you been training with Ghost Eye for the past 2 days? Shouldn't you be increasing your confidence? Luo Nan laughed and didn't continue this topic. Xie Junping turned to look at Qi Nikuan and asked in a low voice, speaking of which, hasn't he been under a bit of pressure lately? Qi Nikuan could only shake his head. Luo Nan pressed against his ear at this time and received a report from the AI. Oh, the parts have been delivered? Xue Lei grinned, 2 whole boxes, over 1,300 kilograms in weight. You want these toys? Don't tell me you want to verify that headband. Luo Nan knew that this was probably the easiest reason for people to accept. Right now, many people expressed curiosity towards the various theories he released. They even questioned their origins. Ree, who was far away on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, used this as a breakthrough point to fabricate rumors to disgust him. Luo Nan could obviously ignore this. With his current status, he already had the qualifications to disregard all of this. In all these years, no one had ever asked where Jean Tong's abilities came from. However, being able to give people a basic direction was always a bit better than making random guesses. At the very least, his current remodeling of the deep blue platform wasn't wrong in saying this. Luo Nan didn't want to deliberately lie to Xue Lei and his other friends. He didn't give a direct answer. He didn't admit nor deny. After a laugh, he changed the topic. It just so happens that I've run out of materials. With you guys replenishing these, I'll finish the experiments at hand in a spurt of energy. Tonight. Oh, I'll use this weekend as well. Chinikuan furrowed his brows. You're not going home? Yeah. 2 days might not even be enough. Hey, hold on. Xue Lei actually recalled the contents of Tian Qi's phone call. He repeated the matter of the so-called Mystic Arts Theme Week to Luo Nan in a few words. The Mystic Arts Research Society will be coming over tomorrow to set up the venue. Luo Nan didn't take this seriously. His response was very dull. Let's do it. After all, the property rights are in their hands. Won't it disturb you? Luo Nan had already considered this point. It's fine to just seal off the 5th to 7th floors. I asked Sister Yuan to set up a separate system. It's not the same system as the academy, so it's not a problem to keep it clean. Let's do this for now. I'll talk to them when I have time. The 7th floor was the energy center and the database. The 6th floor was the main body of the laboratory. The 5th floor was the training field. The modified body needed to undergo a more comprehensive examination there. This was the space that Luo Nan had circled out for himself. There were some problems with the legal principles, but he was willing to communicate with the Mystic Arts Research Society. The price could be discussed. Before his credit limit was maxed out, this bit of money really didn't count for much. Xia Junping volunteered. Tang Yi isn't here, so it's easier to talk to the other members of the society. I'll take care of this matter. Okay. Then I'll have to trouble Brother Ping. Oh, there's one more thing. Luo Nan suddenly thought of a key point. He turned his head to size things up and used the electromagnetic technique that he had just learned a few days ago. He extended his hand and grabbed the electronic pen that he had just tossed down. At the same time, he opened up his work area and brought up the holographic structural diagram of gear. They can mess around with the furnishings of the building, but I don't want them to destroy the overall structure of the room. Especially the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th floors above ground. There's also the 1st and 2nd floors below ground, as well as that large courtyard. He circled 7 or 8 relatively important locations as he spoke. The main structure here is where the essence of my mother's design lies. So, Xia Junping understood tacitly. He patted his chest and guaranteed, I'll keep an eye on them. Only then did he seriously look at the structural diagram. Unfortunately, his eyes were blurry from looking at it, so he couldn't see anything. He just mumbled to strengthen his memory, they can't be destroyed. Otherwise, they'll destroy the layout. How does it have anything to do with feng shui? That's not what I meant. Luo Nan didn't mind. Instead, he laughed. If we're talking about feng shui, it really does look a bit like it. After all, building here involves the philosophy of man and nature. It's impossible to bypass these things. It was already quite late, and it was already past 6:00. Since Luo Nan was going to work overtime, Shui Lei and the others didn't want to disturb him any longer. They said their goodbyes and left. Luo Nan watched them leave. He stood in place and adjusted his breathing, calming his mind once more. Only then did he walk back to the middle of the cluster of mechanical arms. He unloaded the body that had just gone through a round of testing. He continued to draw lines and diagrams based on the results of the test, making preparations for the important experiment that was about to happen soon. The lines within the work area were complex, but the virtual brain system interface was already open within the brain domain that the outside world couldn't see. The equipment interface and the large user manual shone before his eyes, providing him with the most direct guidance. Right now Luo Nan already understood that the main function of the virtual brain system was to manufacture the dynamo core or the psychic core. Moreover, it was to carry out the manufacturing and debugging of the relevant supporting equipment for these precise and peculiar creations. Therefore, the vast majority of the contents of the system's user manual revolved around materials, manufacturing, installation, and debugging. On the other hand, the fundamental nomological foundation of the dynamo core and the psychic core, the configuration, wasn't written too much. It was just a classic example like the fortress. There were also operational instructions, judgment tests, and so on during the conversion process. Of course, this wasn't a good thing for Luo Nan to further delve into the nomological principles of configuration. But the technical guidance that was extremely close to the practical application level was extremely in line with his current needs. Especially since Luo Nan already possessed the psychic core of the external neuron. He also had the headband as the core conversion equipment. After building this laboratory, all he needed to do was transfer the design ideas within the virtual brain system out. He could compare and verify them one by one. Of course, this was accompanied by a large amount of mistakes and losses. Luo Nan didn't care about this anymore. After he transformed into Teacher Luo, he received a commission for the usage of the SVIP model. He also received a credit limit that rose with the tide. These were enough to support his willfulness. Luo Nan was fed with an enormous amount of trial and error opportunities. Even though Luo Nan couldn't be considered a developer in the relevant field for the time being, he was getting closer and closer to a qualified technician. Chapter 592. Time flowed noiselessly under extreme concentration. He was 30 meters deep underground, and he didn't know the changes of day and night. Luo Nan just used the experimental mission as a yardstick. Oh, it was a bit shameless to call it an experiment right now. He just followed the requirements of the virtual brain system and tried to assemble usable combat equipment using components from Earth's technology. Luo Nan occasionally raised his head, only to see that it was 2 o'clock in the morning on the 21st. It was already the winter solstice. Today had quite the significance in the East Asian cultural circles. In the past, his family would gather together no matter what on this day. But today, Luo Nan had used the rotten excuse of concentrated training to run away. One could imagine the unbearable scene when he returned home. This thought only flashed in Luo Nan's mind for a moment before it was squeezed out of existence by the flood of information. Right now, the number of virtual and real interfaces before his eyes had already increased to 4. They included the projected work area, the virtual brain system equipment interface, the user manual. In addition, there was a self-inspection interface that had been opened midway. It was labeled Electromagnetic Vanguard No. 1. Right now, the self-inspection progress was nearing its end. The preliminary inspection results had already been arranged in succession, including the relevant analysis. It took up most of his attention. The left arm module has been completely destroyed. I need to replace it. The backup energy furnace has fallen off. I need to recognize this. It's the fault of my design. The outer armor is corroded. I need to replace part of it. The combat blade. I need to bring 2 more spares. It's too easy to break. The kinetic energy arsenal. Large caliber ammunition and javelins. I need to calculate the ratio again. The consumption is too great. I suggest replenishing nearby. Where is nearby? Luo Nan scratched his head. His fingertips bumped against his headband, which was already a bit warm. He subconsciously changed directions, repeating this process over and over again. The 2 large boxes of spare parts that Shui Lei and the others had sent over were originally sorted and stored in the warehouse by the artificial intelligence. Right now, Luo Nan used his half-baked skills and train of thought to dismantle them into a messy mess. Luckily, the military-grade artificial intelligence that cost him 50 honor points to rent was still worth the price. The virtual brain system hidden deep within the external neuron displayed superior intelligence. As time passed, the collected data was relatively complete, and the progress was finally on the right track. And right now, it was already 5 o'clock in the morning. The multifunctional robot shuttled back and forth between the laboratory and the even more spacious passageway area in front of it, categorizing and arranging his completed works one by one. They were of different sizes and covered a large area. When Luo Nan walked out of the jungle of mechanical arms, he saw the equipment area that took up 40 to 50 square meters. He sucked in a breath of cold air. Isn't there too much? I can't carry it all at once. Flag bearer, calculate the weight. Flag bearer was the code name of the military-grade artificial intelligence. It was the main butler of the laboratory, responsible for the allocation of all resources and basic operations. The relevant data was also readily available. The weight of the equipment is 657.5 kilograms, and the estimated weight of the box is 724 kilograms. As expected, it's time to split them up. Shui Lei and the others had brought over a ton of spare parts and materials. They had been condensed to this degree, and this was already Luo Nan's highest level. Plus, there were also large amounts of ammunition and consumables that were irreplaceable. Luo Nan didn't waste any more energy. He snapped his fingers, divide the boxes into 4 batches. Each batch must be under 200 kilograms. The main structural components are prioritized. Oh, there's also the remote maintenance system. Pack it up as well. This counts separately. Following Luo Nan's command, the multifunctional robots controlled by the flag bearer rolled their caterpillar belts to get busy once more. Luo Nan stared from the side. He watched as he imitated, designed, and forged the equipment. Modules and replacement components were loaded into the airdrop boxes one after another. It would be an exaggeration to say that Luo Nan felt a sense of accomplishment in his heart. But the feeling of solidity that was built up bit by bit was something that nothing could replace. 7 days had passed since the lecture on the 14th. Luo Nan had been preparing at all times during these 7 days. He was going to carry out an assassination operation of the highest difficulty. He had personally set up a guillotine, forged shackles, sharpened blades, and increased his preparations bit by bit. All for the final instant when his hand rose and fell. The one he wanted to behead was undoubtedly Gong Qi. He was a spiritual type extraordinary who was currently tossing and turning in the cloud world anchored by his mother. He was one of the top 100 strongest people in the world. Though Luo Nan already had the departed soul of an extraordinary under his hands, he wouldn't overestimate himself because of this. After all, Her Majesty Empress Wu wouldn't take the lead again. She would first beat the enemy to a pulp, injuring his mind. He only had one chance to kill such a powerful enemy. If he missed this chance, the situation would slip to an uncontrollable level. He might even be killed instead. Luo Nan told himself to have patience and determination. He needed to constantly increase his bargaining chips. He also needed to think of ways to weaken Gong Qi's foundation by every possible means. From his perspective, the two were organically unified. In the end, his plan was inseparable from his own ability and the accumulation of bargaining chips. His accumulation wasn't limited to sparring with Ghost Eye. The packing of precision equipment was a large field of study. The complex environment he was about to face put extremely high demands on him. Luo Nan was quite at ease with Standard Bearer, a military-grade AI, doing the calculations. So he set everything aside for the time being. He walked to the living area in the corner of the laboratory and lay down on a single bed. He closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. Luo Nan finally knew about the matter of Bro Octopus and He Yuan, as well as the matter of Luo Nan's security team drugging him. Luo Nan didn't care about the nature of the matter. What he cared about was the result. He saw that it was the drugging that helped him extricate himself from his extreme exhaustion. It allowed the scattered light of his high-tension state to gather once more. In the end, he realized a major breakthrough. He still couldn't enjoy it to this day. So Luo Nan began to adjust his state of mind and work and rest. He strived to take out a complete period of rest every day. After the lecture on the 14th, his skyrocketed reputation and enormous profit potential had truly diluted the negative effects of the 2000th incident. It gave him some leeway to buffer. Luo Nan meditated and visualized right now. Within the visualization space that seemed to be deep space, stars converged together. It was as if a person was dancing and dancing with joy. The structure of the character, I, was muddled within the visualization diagram of the star atlas. It formed a dense cluster of galaxies that spun in the void. It was as if it was the center of the universe. Luo Nan's consciousness also merged within, embedding itself in the most core position. It seemed to wander unhurriedly around, everywhere. Luo Nan gradually entered a wonderful state of meditative forgetfulness without thought or worry. It was already 8:00 in the morning by the time he woke up. 3 hours of high-quality rest had restored his physical strength and energy to full capacity. He passed through the jungle of robotic arms once more and arrived at a spacious and empty area. The modules, components, and ammunition consumables, along with the remote repair system that he had specially requested, were neatly stacked within the 6 airdrop crates. The crates were opened, awaiting Luo Nan's final inspection. Luo Nan checked the list seriously once to confirm that there were no mistakes. In the end, he stopped before the first airdrop crate that was scheduled to be delivered. The entire crate only had a single module installed. The overall outline was extremely close to a human torso. It was like an exoskeleton assembled armor. But Luo Nan knew very well that the interior of the armor had already been stuffed to the brim by the energy furnace and the transmission system. Even Jerry couldn't fit inside. Luo Nan extended his hand to caress the torso module. At the same time, a virtual window labeled Electromagnetic Vanguard 1 was projected onto his retina, conducting a final inspection. Of course, this module wasn't meant for human use. It wasn't a wearable device. It was a design that was completely different from the idea of exoskeleton armor. And the control terminal of this design came from the headband that Luo Nan wore. It was the God-binding headband that was displayed in the virtual brain system. Oh, I hope this toy can endure more tossing and turning. Even if it was only temporary, it couldn't be changed every day. In the end, his level as a designer wasn't high enough. Luo Nan sighed. He patted the outer armor of the module and stood up. The multifunctional robot that was already waiting to the side came forward to carry out the final sealing of the crate. After everything was done, Luo Nan picked up one of the crates and gave it a feel. He nodded, there shouldn't be any problems. The 200-kilogram airdrop crate was only one size smaller than the crate that Shui Lei and the others had brought over yesterday. The average person really wouldn't be able to lift it. For Luo Nan, who was already awakened, this bit of weight was nothing. But what he had to do next was far more difficult than lifting the crate by 100 times. Luo Nan took a deep breath and just sat cross-legged in front of the 6 airdrop crates. He extended his hand to support the first crate that was about to be delivered. His eyes were half closed, and the position of his mind rose in an instant. He suddenly passed through 30 meters of ground and crossed 1,000 meters in the air. A thought floated in the air above Xia City. It was the highest level of traffic. He looked down from high above and overlooked the enormous city within the thin morning mist. He could see tens of thousands of high-rise buildings distributed within a 200-kilometer radius. They formed the main structure of Xia City. 200 million residents lived within this steel jungle. They were like insects crawling within the branches and leaves of the vines. Together, they formed the entire ecology of Xia City. Expanding outwards, there was the boundless ocean to the east. The 4 satellite cities of Xia City were distributed in a ring in the north, south, and south directions. There was also a military defense line further out. The outermost area was close to 300 kilometers away from the center of Xia City. This was also the limit of the entire Xia City metropolitan area. If one looked further out, the open sea was not counted. The inland area was a vast plain and fertile land. Before the era of distortion, there used to be a bustling city with a dense population. Presently, it was already a desolate land where mutants wreaked havoc. There was such a clear boundary between prosperity and desolation. But on a more macroscopic level, it was only a part of this planet's ecosystem. To put it more broadly, it was nothing more than a speck of dust within this space and time. Chapter 593. There were at least 5 or 6 different space-time structures distributed within the range of Luo Nan's mental senses. This included the Earth that bore and gave birth to Luo Nan. It even included the most grand universe that stretched out endlessly. It also included the mysterious cloud world. If one were to lower the standard even further, Xia City and its surrounding extraordinaries had their own unique laws and laws. Though they were not stable, Xia City and its surrounding extraordinaries had their own unique laws and laws. Of course, this also included Luo Nan, who was the origin of the large coordinate system that continued to spread out. There were also 2 other relatively unique existences. One was the psychic wave network that covered Xia City and its surroundings. Some of its tentacles extended to the entire world. This network had been operated by President Ouyang for many years. Even though it was mostly used as a communication network, when it formally interfered with the material plane, its laws were strict and strict. It was a body of its own, not inferior to any extraordinary domain. The other was the unique building where Luo Nan's fleshly body resided. It was gear. From Luo Nan's perspective, there was a domain quietly taking form with gear as its axis. It used a single gear to drive a myriad of orders. From near to far, from real to virtual, it combed and operated the chaotic and disorderly energy and information between heaven and earth. It coupled and organized, gathering astonishing energy in silence. It projected a long chain that anchored the distant spacetime, erecting a bridge that linked the two worlds. Such spacetime laws were in no way inferior to those of the extraordinary domain. They even surpassed them in terms of level and scope. This was his mother's work. It was indeed like a feng shui layout, but it was also a domain that possessed its own laws. It was a grand extraordinary configuration. At this very moment, Luo Nan was using the laws of gear to do something that even extraordinaries would find hard to do. He roughly observed the surrounding environment and confirmed that there were already extraordinaries overflowing in Xia City. For the time being, there weren't any major powers paying attention to him. After the cage theory came out, contact is invasion became a hot phrase in the inner world. There were even people from the Ability User Society who jointly proposed to enact a Privacy Act. The content was probably to restrict the willful casting of psychic ability user senses and so on. Let's not talk about whether or not this purely eye-catching act had any meaning. The mental senses and lock-ons of extraordinaries were much more cautious and conservative than usual in this sensitive period. Especially for Luo Nan. This really did give Luo Nan ample space. It also made him more daring and reckless when he did things. Luo Nan's thoughts plunged in the opposite direction, cast towards the gear that seemed to be spinning yet not spinning in the depths of the jungle of the North Bank. And at this time, an incorporeal and mystical structure opened up in the depths of the void, forming a passageway that led straight to the distant spacetime. The passageway pulled Luo Nan's thoughts over, and in the blink of an eye, an unstoppable gale and cloud assaulted his face. In a certain sense, the cloud world was simply Luo Nan's own back garden. If those two unwelcome guests weren't here, then it would be even more deserving of its reputation. The thought that Luo Nan projected was like a kite fluttering leisurely in the air. It made a turn within the turbulent clouds. It was just a turn, but the environment of the void where it was located was painted with other colors. Clouds surged high up in the sky at this moment, clearly reflecting the image of a jungle and the buildings hidden within. To be exact, it was the jungle of the north shore of Acumen College where Luo Nan currently resided. This image faded to almost nothingness. It was undoubtedly a mirage. And in just half a second, colors were added to this mirage scene. A rough reddish-black background could be faintly seen. The shape of an undulating mountainous region was faintly discernible. There was also dark red lava that spread and flowed. Two completely different scenes of nothingness mixed together with the surging clouds high up in the sky. The colors were mottled, and it was dazzling to the eye. A mushed-mouthed ape just so happened to pass by nearby. It was also bewitched by this marvelous scene. It bared its teeth and rushed over, seeming to want to touch this marvelous scene. Luo Nan's hand, which was supporting the airdrop box in the underground 6th floor of gear, didn't move at all. He just slightly tightened his brows. The word "I" that was resplendent with starlight within his visualized space seemed to truly come alive. It folded its hands, bent its knees, and spun and danced. The myriad stars that converged to form the word "I" blended into one entity, and they each formed their own star orbits. They drew a boundless star atlas in the deep void. Luo Nan's soul strength, which he had accumulated explosively over the past few days, circulated and transformed within this star atlas. It naturally converged and fused, condensing into an indistinct and immeasurable point at the very center of the star atlas. It became the sole origin of the vast coordinate system, and it couldn't be moved. When this coordinate system took form, Luo Nan's mind, the laboratory he resided in, the cloud world of another spacetime continuum, and even the rough and gloomy nameless mountainous region clearly rang with a muffled roar of thunder. When the sound of thunder crushed down, gear, the cloud world, and the nameless mountainous region. These three spacetime structures had always operated according to their own laws and rules. They froze in an instant. It was only for an instant. Perhaps it was 1,000th of a second, or even a 10,000th of a second. Then they recovered their fixed operating trajectories. But in that instant of freezing, the airdrop box that Luo Nan's hand pressed down on became the only moving object. This so-called movement was not the ordinary form of sliding, dropping, or flying. In that instant, the light and shadow of its body warped. It was like a mirage, and it suddenly disappeared. The two intersecting scenes of the mirage in the cloud world disappeared as well. So much so that the mushed-mouthed ape could only stare blankly at the thick layer of clouds that hadn't changed for many years after charging over. Luo Nan's eyes were still half-closed, but his mind was a thread ahead of time. He set off from the origin and drew a long, perfectly straight line. He imprinted a point on the large coordinate system. The coordinates of that point was his designated destination. The line was flat and straight. It didn't bend in the slightest. But in this moment, the airdrop box that crossed space drew an indescribably complex trajectory in the dark and unfathomable void. It pierced through the barrier of space and time twice in succession. Only then did its short and gorgeous journey come to an end. It truly possessed powerful kinetic energy. It carried the whooshing sound of the wind as it descended diagonally to the ground from a height of several dozen meters in midair. The air it pierced through already carried the fishy smell of rotten eggs. This was the result of the long years of accumulation of sulfides and halide gases that were spewed out by the intense volcanic activity. The airdrop box's journey was nearing its end. All that remained was time for the show of universal gravitation. Luo Nan's eyelids blinked, but they didn't completely open. In this moment, his originally vigorous and abundant soul strength was like the water of a lake that had its bottom completely ruptured. The water level dropped by more than half in an instant. The excessively terrifying output of soul strength caused his brain to experience a short period of dizziness. But he couldn't afford to rest. His consciousness locked tightly onto the falling airdrop box. He calculated its position and distance on the plane of his soul cloak. The airdrop box's shock absorber equipment automatically activated when it felt the movement of the box. It attempted to correct its posture and weaken the impact. But before these equipment could truly display their use, a figure leaped up from a certain fissure in the ground diagonally below. The figure rose into the air and firmly grabbed the falling airdrop box before landing on the ground with ease. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.